You have transmigrated and inherited a bankrupt sect. You are besieged by the nearby Mad Blade sect, which is demanding 10,000 low-grade spirit stones. They even want to sell your 8-year-old junior sister as a dual cultivation cauldron. Right now, you are sitting on the broken-legged sect leader's throne. You just reached into your pocket, and 3 top-grade spirit stones were credited to you. 1 million per stone, which converts to 3 million low-grade spirit stones. The main peak of the Azure Cloud sect. The main hall is leaky and covered in cobwebs. The previous master is dead, and the senior brother ran away with all the disciples. Now, I, Chen Chang'an, have become the leader of the Azure Cloud sect. In my previous life, I was a miserable corporate slave, but after transmigrating, I still ended up taking over a 9th-rate sect on the verge of bankruptcy. A gambler father, a runaway brother, a bankrupt sect, and a confused me. It's hopeless. Bang! The hall door was kicked off its hinges. 4 burly men stepped over the threshold. The fat man in the lead wore a black robe, juggling a 9-ring broadsword that rattled loudly. Wang Hu, a deacon of the outer sect of the Mad Blade sect, 3rd level of chi refining, a cushy job he got by brown-nosing. Sect leader Chen, hiding in the main hall pretending to be dead to avoid debt. Your master borrowed 10 medium-grade spirit stones 6 months ago. With interest, you owe 10,000 low-grade ones. If you can't pay up today, you'll be in for a rough time. 10 medium-grade stones are worth 1,000 low-grade ones. In half a year, it ballooned to 100,000, 100 times the original amount. Even loan sharks aren't this ruthless. Can't pay? Simple. Hand over the land deed issued by the Immortal Alliance to the Azure Cloud sect. Wang Hu turned his head, and glared at the corner of the main hall. Old servant Uncle Fu and junior sister Bai Yao Yao were huddled there. She was 8 years old, wearing 2 crooked buns on her head, shivering while clutching Uncle Fu's sleeve. This girl was quite pretty. Selling her to the Spring Breeze Pavilion as a public cauldron would cover 2,000. Uncle Fu panicked. Dragging his lame leg, he took a large step forward, grabbing a broken sword to block Bai Yao Yao. Wang Hu, if you dare touch Yao Yao, this old man will fight you to the death. Overcome with rage, he coughed up a large mouthful of black blood. Bai Yao Yao shrieked in terror. Uncle Fu, don't die. Yao Yao won't eat candied huzz anymore. I shouted for help in my mind. Sect population system binding successful. Settlement rules. Based on the number of living people registered in the sect, 1 top-grade spirit stone is issued daily for each person. Today's reward has been issued. 3 top-grade spirit stones. Already deposited into the system space. 3 top-grade spirit stones. 1 top grade is worth 1 million low grade. 3 is 3 million. Bottom-level rogue cultivators would kill for just a few low-grade ones. And now the system is giving them away for free daily. Just because the Azure Cloud sect has 3 breathing people including myself. I reached into my robe, my fingertips touching the 3 heavy, diamond-shaped stones. Better to come at the right time than early. It's time for my performance. I stood up, and the grand armchair collapsed with a bang. Wang Hu sneered. Sect leader Chen, if you are reluctant to part with this chick, then hand over the money, and we will leave immediately. I didn't say a word, just reached out. The incredibly rich and pure spiritual energy swept across the scene. Withered weeds sprouted instantly, and the foxtail grass in the corner bloomed and bore fruit on the spot. Uncle Fu, who had just vomited blood, took a breath of spiritual energy, and the chaotic meridians in his body calmed down instantly. I tossed the top-grade spirit stone in my hand, which was emitting a faint glow. My movements extremely casual, as if I were just tossing a glass marble. Slap! With a flick of my wrist, the spirit stone whistled through the air, smashing accurately onto Wang Hu's nose bridge. Crack! The nose bridge bone broke. The spirit stone fell onto the bluestone slab, the glow swirling, absolutely pure. Wang Hu didn't even bother to wipe his nosebleed, stretching out his trembling hands. This top grade. His 3 underlings' eyes were about to fall out. I walked down the steps slowly, looking down at him from above. 10,000 in debt, right? This is 1 million. I kicked Wang Hu's knee, and pointed to the spirit stone on the ground. The 10,000 is deducted. The remaining 990,000. Give me the change. Change? With what? The Mad Blade sect is at best a 9th-rate sect, let alone 900,000. Even if they sold all their underwear, they couldn't scrape together this astronomical sum. This isn't called asking for change. This is called raiding their home. Thump. Wang Hu's knees hit the bluestone floor. Sect leader Chen, Grandpa Chen, the little one deserves to die. He kowtowed frantically, his forehead hitting the gravel with a rhythmic thud. He swung his arms and slapped his own face hard, turning it into a pig's head after a few blows. The 3 thugs saw this and knelt down, knocking their heads and begging for mercy. You just said, you wanted to sell my junior sister where? Wang Hu froze, kowtowing heavily toward Bai Yao Yao in the corner. Grandma, ancestor, I just had too much to drink. Get back and tell your sect leader to bring 990,000 in small change. Otherwise this isn't over. Wang Hu felt like he had been granted an amnesty, wiped the spirit stone clean with his sleeve, placed it on the altar table, kowtowed 3 more times, and ran out of the main hall with his 3 underlings. They were in such a hurry that they tripped over the threshold, the 4 of them rolling down the stone steps in a heap. The main hall fell silent. Uncle Fu leaned on his broken sword, unable to recover for a long time. Bai Yao Yao sniffled, poking her 2 buns out. Senior brother, can those stones buy many candied haws? They can buy all the candied haws in the entire great desolate province. The little girl digested the meaning of this sentence for a moment, then jumped up. Senior brother is so amazing. You crooked the bad guy's nose, and made him call Yao Yao grandma. I patted her head. Uncle Fu walked to the altar table with his broken sword, his muddy old eyes staring fixedly at the spirit stone. Young sect leader, where did you get such peerless treasures? The founding ancestor revealed himself in a dream, and I dug them up next to the outhouse in the back mountain. Uncle Fu opened his mouth wide, not asking any more questions, but just looked up at the damaged roof of the main hall. I tucked the spirit stones back into my sleeve and sat back in the chair. One person produces one top-grade spirit stone a day. Now there are 3 of us. 3 stones every day. 30 people would be 300. 3,000 people would be 3,000. If the Azure Cloud sect had 10,000 registered disciples, I would be bringing in 10,000 top-grade spirit stones a day. 10 billion low-grade spirit stones every day. I suppressed the urge to roar to the heavens. The system notification popped up immediately. The system funds currently bound to the host. Top-grade spirit stones cannot be directly converted into the host's cultivation level, and are only used for sect development and personnel recruitment. Understood. Trying to use the salary money to cheat and upgrade myself? No way. I am now carrying 3 million in cash, but I am myself just a fragile chi refining cultivator. An innocent man is guilty of his own treasure. In this world of cultivation where murder and looting are as common as drinking water, a weakling carrying top-grade spirit stones is no different from a 3-year-old child flaunting gold bricks. Uncle Fu, how can we make the sect have 30 people? 300 people? Uncle Fu smiled bitterly. Young sect leader, the Azure Cloud sect's reputation in the desolate province is already rotten. Last year, we couldn't even gather enough people for the Immortal Alliance examination. Everyone outside says we are a dead sect specialized in scamming. Who would dare to come? What about outside? Do the bottom-level rogue cultivators have it easy? Uncle Fu's expression darkened. The desolate province is a barren edge of the cultivation world. The Immortal Alliance only treats this place as a source of low-level resources. 80% of the good resources are held by the 4 major holy lands and first-rate families. Bottom-level rogue cultivators can only work as mining laborers in the holy land's spirit mines. The bottom of the mines often erupts with subterranean fire, and bloodthirsty monsters dwell there. 1 month. 2 low-grade spirit stones. If you die in the mine, you don't even get a worn-out straw mat. Even so, for the sake of 2 low-grade spirit stones a month, there are still countless people fighting to the death every day. 2 low-grade spirit stones for a whole month, and you could die at any moment. And my system produces 1 top-grade spirit stone per person per day, equivalent to 1 million low-grade spirit stones. Every day, those abandoned, exploited, discarded low-value labor forces are all headcounts here. Headcount is a top-grade spirit stone. Top-grade spirit stones are everything. I stood up. Uncle Fu, lead the way. Where to? Down the mountain. Go to the marketplace to recruit some disciples. Uncle Fu was shocked. Young sect leader, think twice. Wealth should be kept hidden. Rogue cultivators outside would risk their lives for half a spirit stone. You're right. So, before going out, we must make our fists harder. I flipped my palm, and the remaining 2 top-grade spirit stones were patted onto the table. Uncle Fu, absorb it. First, heal that lame leg, and break through a realm by the way. I wanted to try. If I can't improve my own cultivation, then letting my employees absorb them should be fine. Uncle Fu was so scared that his broken sword clattered to the ground, and he backed away repeatedly. Young sect leader, you must not. This old man's body is half buried in the yellow earth. Using this would invite heavenly retribution. You should keep it for yourself to cultivate. That is the hope of the Azure Cloud sect. If I could absorb it, I would have long ago. My constitution is repulsive to spirit stones. They dissipate as soon as I touch them. Uncle Fu didn't believe this ghost story at all, thinking I was just finding a way to treat his leg injury. He was so moved that his eye sockets turned red. Young sect leader, your kindness, this old servant cannot repay even in the next life. If you really have no use for it, give it to Yao Yao. My heart stirred. Junior sister by Yao Yao, 8 years old, born with an ice jade bone, waterwood dual mutated spirit root. This monstrous talent, if thrown into any of the 4 holy lands, would be fought over by the supreme elders. It's a pity that the Azure Cloud sect couldn't even afford to eat, and had raised this peerless genius like a little beggar for half a year. I looked down at Bai Yao Yao, who was chewing on her sleeve, a patch of black mud on the tip of her nose. Yao Yao, come here. The little girl ran up happily, looking up with her dusty little face. I grabbed the top-grade spirit stone on the table, stuffed it directly into her dirty palm, and pinched the bun on top of her head. Take it. Try to absorb it. Once you finish, senior brother will take you down the mountain to buy candied haws. The mountain wind wrapped in withered leaves blew in from outside the main hall. The foxtail flower in the corner, which had been spurred by the spiritual energy, swayed in the wind. I stood by the threshold, looking at Yao Yao holding the spirit stones with both hands, already calculating one thing in my mind. When recruiting, I must first ask which mine they came from. Bai Yao Yao took the spirit stones, her dirty little hands clutching the 2 stones that were brighter than her head, and tilted her head to look at Chen Chang'an. Senior brother, absorb it? With my mouth? No, not with your mouth. Hold it in your hand. Feel its power. Take it slow. Don't rush. Bai Yao Yao sat cross-legged on the ground, clutching one top-grade spirit stone in each hand, and closed her eyes, imagining the feeling of eating something something. 5-colored light surged violently, and the rich spiritual energy transformed into 2 thick white pillars of air, pouring madly into her body. A gale rose in the dilapidated main hall, and the gravel on the ground was blown everywhere. Uncle Fu grabbed the edge of the altar table, his legs digging firmly into the ground so he wouldn't be blown away. Bai Yao Yao was enveloped in a light blue icy light membrane, and the stray hairs on her buns stood on end. Muffled, explosive sounds of meridians came from her tiny body. Qi refining, 2nd level. Qi refining, 3rd level. Qi refining, 9th level. Boom! A visible wave of spiritual energy exploded from Bai Yao Yao's body. The dust on the altar table was shaken away, and several tiles on the roof of the main hall clattered down. Foundation establishment. The infusion of spiritual energy didn't stop. The energy of the top-grade spirit stones continued to pour out. Foundation establishment. Early stage. Foundation establishment. Middle stage. Foundation establishment. Late stage. Until the peak of foundation establishment. The light on the spirit stones dimmed completely, and the 2 grayish-white waste stones crumbled into powder, pattering down from between her tiny fingers. Bai Yao Yao opened her eyes, icy blue spiritual light swirling in her big, watery eyes. She let out a long, loud burp, and patted her round little belly. Senior brother, I'm so full. Chen Chang'an silently withdrew his gaze. Even for ordinary cultivators with advanced techniques, wanting to absorb a top-grade spirit stone would take at least a month of secluded cultivation to refine. If one were slightly greedy for progress, the massive spiritual energy would rupture the meridians, causing death by explosion on the spot. This little girl had no techniques, did no refining, all relying on the perverse talent of the waterwood dual-mutated spirit root, coupled with the pure and gentle characteristics of top-grade spirit stones. She treated absorbing spiritual energy as drinking water. If not for the fact that she had never learned any cultivation techniques, and didn't know how to compress her energy to impact the golden core, this massive spiritual energy would never have stopped just by pushing her to the peak of foundation establishment. Uncle Fu was completely speechless. He had lived for more than half a lifetime, cultivating for 37 years just to reach the peak of foundation establishment, and later fell back to qi refining after being injured. This little girl had caught up to his peak period cultivation in the time it takes to burn an incense stick. The world is unfair. However, this unfairness is now standing on his side. Chen Chang'an squatted down, flicked the dust off Bai Yao Yao's forehead. Let's go. Down the mountain. Senior brother will take you to buy candied haws. Yay! The walk from the main peak of the Azure Cloud sect to the Rogue Cultivator Marketplace in the east of the desolate province takes about half an hour. Along the way, Uncle Fu dragged his lame leg at the very front. Although he didn't absorb the top-grade spirit stones directly, the pure spiritual energy overflowing from the main hall had already nourished his exhausted meridians, making his legs and feet a little nimbler than before. But as they got closer to the marketplace, Uncle Fu's steps became slower and slower, full of worry. Young sect leader, the rogue cultivators in the marketplace down the mountain are mostly leftovers dug out and thrown away by the 4 major holy lands. Missing arms and legs is a common occurrence, and quite a few have damaged spirit roots. Even if we can afford the spirit stones, most of them probably wouldn't dare to come. The reputation of the Azure Cloud sect, Sai, is truly rotten to the core. Don't hold too much hope. In case we can't recruit anyone today. Uncle Fu, Chen Chang'an interrupted him, patting the bulging storage bag at his waist. The 3 top-grade spirit stones issued by the system this morning, 2 were given to Yao Yao, and 1 was left. 1 top grade can be exchanged for 100 medium grade, 10,000 low grade. Before setting off, he had already broken that top grade spirit stone into small change in the system space. The storage bag contained exactly 100 high grade spirit stones. Don't worry, in front of absolute money power, even if it's a dog, I can make it willingly wear the Azure Cloud sect's uniform. What is a uniform? It's the disciple's robe. Uncle Fu opened his mouth, but didn't try to persuade him further in the end. Bai Yao Yao skipped and hopped at the very back, her little Taoist robe billowing in the mountain wind. The peak of foundation establishment cultivation made her 5 senses infinitely sharper, and she had been having a great time catching butterflies along the way. The Eastern Rogue Cultivator Marketplace was built on both banks of a dried-up riverbed at the foot of the Azure Cloud sect mountain. They called it a marketplace, but it was actually a vast slum built from rags and dilapidated sheds. As the 3 of them entered the entrance of the marketplace, a strong, sour, rotten smell mixed with a rusty, bloody stench hit them. He frowned, raising his sleeve to cover his mouth and nose. The scene before his eyes was even more shocking than the smell. In the mud on both sides of the road, ragged rogue cultivators were sitting or lying down. There was an old man with a missing arm picking through discarded alchemy dregs in a trash heap. There was a sallow, emaciated woman holding an infant, squatting in the corner, staring hollowly at the ground. There was a teenager of about 10 years old, wrapped in black-stained bandages, limping through the crowd with a wooden stick. Numbness. Everyone had the same expression on their faces, that look of being broken by life, so much so that they couldn't even be bothered to despair anymore. Bai Yao Yao stopped hopping. She shrank behind Chen Chang'an, grabbing his sleeve tightly. Uncle Fu reminded in a low voice, "Young sect leader, restrain your spiritual energy fluctuations. Don't get targeted." Chen Chang'an nodded, suppressed the spiritual energy leak, and walked quickly toward the depths of the marketplace, crossing the crowded main road, turning into a small alley that that reeked of filth. At the end was a row of crumbling thatched sheds. Chen Chang'an saw a familiar face at a glance. Li Dainyu, to be precise. He recognized him at once from the previous owner's memories as the once burly, booming-voiced outer sect deacon of the Azure Cloud sect. Right now, Li Dainyu was sitting in the mud, his back hunched, his mud-covered fingers, weaving a pair of inferior-quality spirit-gathering straw sandals. His Taoist robe hadn't been washed in who knows how long, the cuffs worn into strips of cloth, revealing arms covered in winding black patterns. Those were the traces left by Dao injuries eroding his meridians. His cultivation had fallen to the 5th level of Qi refining. A once peak foundation establishment cultivator was now weaving straw sandals in the mud. Beside him were 3 boisterous, burly men. Judging by their attire, they were local thugs collecting protection money in the marketplace. The bearded leader squatted in front of Li Dainyu, using his toe to pick up a pair of straw sandals he had woven, tossing them into a mud puddle in disgust. Big brother Dainyu, I heard your wife ran off with the mining boss from the spirit mine pit last month. TSK. He's 8th level of Qi refining, much stronger than you. You're a piece of trash. Why keep her? Another skinny monkey mocked him with a strange voice. Don't be sad, brother Dainyu. Once you pay this month's stall fee, us brothers will treat you to a drink, and introduce you to a widow. The 3 thugs laughed wantonly. Li Dainyu bit his teeth tightly, his mud-covered fingers gripping the straw rope, his knuckles turning white. He didn't make a sound, not because he didn't want to, but because he dared not. He was now a cripple at the 5th level of Qi refining, and as long as he opened his mouth to talk back, he would be beaten up. Chen Chang'an had seen enough. He strode forward. Get lost. If you want to find a widow, go back and find your own mother. The bearded man stood up abruptly, his face filled with fierce light, his hand already reaching for the iron sword hilt at his waist. Which one of you has no eyes? Before he could finish, his body stiffened violently. Bai Yaoyao poked her head out from behind Chen Chang'an, and the spiritual pressure of the Peak Foundation establishment was released suddenly. The terrifying spiritual energy crushed down directly. In this slum where the highest level was at most the 9th level of Qi refining, this pressure was like a physical entity. The bearded man's face turned pale instantly, his hand springing away from the sword hilt as if electrocuted. Foundation establishment. His Adam's apple rolled, swallowing saliva frantically. The 2 underlings behind him had already backed away several steps in terror. Today's business. Consider it my brother not understanding the rules. The bearded man squeezed out a smile that was uglier than crying. I hope all the noble people will be generous. The little ones will get lost now. He desperately winked at his underlings, and the 3 of them ran away in a panic, slipping into the deepest part of the alley. Li Dainyu raised his head blankly. When he saw the face of the person who had arrived, the straw rope in his hand dropped directly. His lips trembled several times. He subconsciously wanted to wipe his mud-covered hands on his clothes, but after rubbing for a long time, he realized his clothes were even dirtier than his hands. In the end, he gave up, shrank his hands behind his back, and lowered his head. Sect leader. The voice was as coarse as sandpaper scraping against a stone. Chen Chang'an squatted down in front of him. Dainyu, come back to the Azure Cloud sect. The position of outer sect manager is reserved for you. Li Dainyu's body swayed, then shook his head. Sect leader, don't ruin that position. I am now a cripple. My meridians are mostly shattered, and my cultivation is only at the 5th level of Qi refining. Going back is just adding a burden to the sect. He lowered his head, reaching out to fish for the flattened straw sandals in the mud puddle. Furthermore, the Azure Cloud sect itself can't even afford to eat now. Why should I go back? To starve to death together? Chen Chang'an didn't answer. He took 5 high-grade spirit stones directly from his storage bag, and slapped them onto the broken wooden board in front of Li Dainyu with a bang. The rich spiritual energy exploded in the corner of the marketplace, transforming into white mist that spiraled and rose around the board. Within a radius of 10 yards, the air became significantly clearer. Back then, you hurt your Dao Foundation for the sake of the sect. Later, the sect ran out of money, cutting off your pill supply, which is why you fell to this point. Chen Chang'an tilted his chin slightly, pointing to the broken wooden board. This is your work injury compensation. Whether you go back to the Azure Cloud sect or not is up to you. Take the money first, and go fix the injuries on your meridians. Pausing for half a second, Chen Chang'an lengthened his tone. If you are still willing to go back and continue as the outer sect manager, from now on, every month, your base salary will be this amount. Li Dainyu's hand reaching for the straw sandals froze in midair, the black mud from his fingertips dripping into the water puddle. His breathing was completely ruined. 5 high-grade stones, a full 5 of them, calculated. This was 50,000 low-grade spirit stones. Back when the Azure Cloud sect was at its most glorious, he worked from dawn till dusk for a whole month, and at most he could receive 1 medium-grade spirit stone, which was 100 low-grade ones. If he had to weave inferior straw sandals in this sewer to earn this sky-high astronomical sum, let alone this lifetime, even if he let his ancestors for 18 generations climb out of their graves to weave along with him, weaving until his 73rd generation descendant took his last breath, without even taking a holiday in between, he would absolutely never be able to scrape together even a corner of these 5 stones. Every month, this amount, this is called a base salary. Li Dainyu's Adam's apple moved violently. The sound of him swallowing saliva was terrifyingly loud. Sect leader. This. Li Dainyu's breathing missed several beats. His whole body began to tremble violently, and his teeth teeth rattled. In the next second, his knees slammed into the ground. Crack! The bluestone slab beneath his knees shattered directly, mud splashing everywhere. Sect leader. Lee Daniu's forehead slammed hard into the gravel board, tears mixed with mud covering his face. He bit his fingertip, and fresh blood dripped onto the gravel. Lee Daniu swears by his heart blood from this day on. In this life and this world, I will follow only Sect Leader Chen. If I violate this oath, may I be struck by 5 thunders, and meet with 10,000 calamities. There was a faint sound of thunder rolling in the sky. The Great Tao Oath was established. Chen Chang'an reached out and pulled him up from the ground. A system prompt rang in his mind. Lee Daniu successfully recorded in the sect roster. Current sect-bound population, 4 people. 4 people now. Tomorrow, I can receive another top-grade spirit stone. Chen Chang'an patted the mud off Lee Daniu's shoulder, turned around and scanned the surroundings. The movement of him slapping the table with those 5 high-grade spirit stones wasn't small. In the surrounding thatched sheds, countless eyes were watching from behind broken cloth curtains. On those previously numb faces, at this moment, they were all written with the same word. Greed. So greedy that their eyes turned green. But no one dared to come forward. Chen Chang'an scanned around with satisfaction, fished out a broken copper gong from Lee Daniu's stall. He held the gong up. Clang! The sound of the copper gong exploded over the marketplace. Countless heads poked out from the thatched sheds. Chen Chang'an cleared his throat, full of energy. The Azure Cloud sect is recruiting. No spirit root requirement. No cultivation requirement. No age requirement. Even if you are missing arms or legs, we'll take you. Food provided. Housing provided. Cultivation provided. Base salary is 10 low-grade spirit stones per month. First come, first served. Limited spots. Recruitment closes once filled. The marketplace was quiet for 2 seconds, and then, like a pot of boiling water, it completely exploded. Countless ragged figures rushed out from the thatched sheds, from the corners, from the side of the drainage ditches, running wildly toward the direction where Chen Chang'an was. Is it true? Food and housing provided? 10 low-grade spirit stones a month? I only get 2 when risking my life in the mining pit. Get out of the way. Don't push. I came first. The crowd surged. Lee Daniu instinctively blocked in front of Chen Chang'an, spreading his arms to block the people. Line up. All of you, line up. Whoever dares to cut the line will be disqualified immediately. Chen Chang'an leaned against the crooked shed pillar, watching the sea of heads before him, calculating rapidly in his heart. A rough scan showed at least 300 or 400 people surging over, and it was still increasing. At the end of the alley in the distance, more rogue cultivators who had heard the commotion were struggling to squeeze their way here. 300 or 400 people. Tomorrow's system income could increase by more than 100 times. Chen Chang'an patted Lee Daniu on the shoulder. Leave the recruitment to you. Following that, he held up a finger. I will state the standard simply. No limit on spirit roots. No limit on cultivation level. No limit on age. No limit on gender. Missing arms and legs are fine too. As long as they can breathe, we take them. Lee Daniu was stunned on the spot after hearing Chen Chang'an's standards. Forget the AHS. After recruiting, bring them up the mountain directly. Before dark, everyone must report to the Azure Cloud sect. Chen Chang'an spoke very quickly, not leaving any room for the other party to question. Lee Daniu's brain was a mess, subconsciously straightening his back and nodding. Sect leader, don't worry. I will definitely bring them by dark. Arrange it properly. Chen Chang'an turned and held Bai Yao Yao's little hand. Let's go. Let's go by Candied Haws. As soon as Bai Yao Yao heard there were Candied Haws, she cheered, her feet pushing hard against the ground to jump in place. This was a peak foundation establishment cultivation base forcibly stacked by top-grade spirit stones. The 8-year-old girl didn't know how to control the skyrocketing spiritual energy at all. Crack! A crisp sound came from Chen Chang'an's right shoulder, and he was almost dragged away by this strange force. Chen Chang'an bared his teeth and rubbed his shoulder, which had nearly dislocated, hurriedly leading Bai Yao Yao and Uncle Fu to retreat toward the main road of the marketplace. In the broken shed, Lee Daniu stood on the spot, listening to the increasingly boiling roar at the end of the alley, his brain finally turning slowly in hindsight. Wait, what was the standard the sect leader just set? For no limits, as long as they can breathe. Is the sect leader recruiting disciples, or coming to collect junk? I must have misheard. Yes, must have misheard. On both sides of the main road of the marketplace, the dilapidated sheds were crowded together. The stall selling Candied Haws was sandwiched between the one selling talisman paper, and the one selling rat poison. The boss was an auntie with missing front teeth, the thin paper covering the Candied Haws on the stall covered in a layer of dust. How much? The auntie looked up and scanned Chen Chang'an's patched Taoist robe, then looked at the crippled old man beside him, and the little girl covered in dirt. 2 copper coins per stick. Don't touch if you have no money. If you rub off the sugar frost, I can't sell it. Chen Chang'an didn't answer. How do you count it if I pay with spirit stones? The auntie was happy, revealing her toothless gums. Oh, spirit stones, huh? A piece of low-grade fragmented spirit stone can cover 50 sticks. Chen Chang'an flipped his wrist, clamping a piece of low-grade spirit stone of excellent quality between his fingers. Ding! The spirit stone landed accurately on the broken wooden table in front of the auntie, rolling twice. 50 sticks. I'll take them all. The wrinkles on the auntie's face all stiffened, staring at that spirit stone, her eyelids twitching wildly. A whole piece of low-grade spirit stone. In this rogue cultivator marketplace, you might not be able to save up one complete piece even after mining for 3 months. Before the auntie could react, Bai Yaoyao already had one stick in her left hand and one in her right, her cheeks bulging out. Eat slowly. Chen Chang'an grabbed a handful of candied haws and stuffed them into the storage bag. MPH. Zun Hao Chu, Bai Yaoyao said, her mouth full of sugar syrup, mumbling indistinctly. The red sugar syrup smeared half of her little face. Uncle Fu turned his face away, his shoulders shaking non-stop. Buying candied haws was just a side task. Chen Chang'an's real goal was at the east end of the marketplace, the 10,000 Treasures Pavilion, Eastern Branch. As the branch opened by the largest chain merchant in the desolate province in the Eastern Road Cultivator marketplace, although it was in a remote location, the upper limit of resources that could be mobilized on weekdays was limited, but that gold-lettered signboard was still polished bright. The Azure Cloud sect didn't even have a single intact pillar now, and looking at the prospect of hundreds of people coming in, he couldn't just let them sleep in the open and chew on tree bark. The three of them pushed the door and entered. Behind the counter, a clerk was resting his head on his arms and dozing off, a puddle of drool flowing out. Uncle Fu stepped forward, and coughed heavily. The clerk was startled awake, wiped the drool from the corner of his mouth, and looked at the three of them with extreme impatience. Ragged Taoist robes, crippled old man, little beggar covered in sugar syrup. The clerk rolled his eyes, slumping back onto the counter. Go beg for food across the street. If you want to buy cheap goods, go pick from the shelves on the left yourself. Don't break the formation. Chen Chang'an walked to the counter, tapping his fingers on the desktop. The largest size load-bearing stone pillars. I want 10 sets. The clerk didn't even lift his eyelids. If you can't afford it, don't stir up trouble. Chen Chang'an continued to report the menu. 10,000-year green stone bricks for construction. I want 5,000 first. Standard disciple Taoist robes. 100 sets each of large, medium, and small sizes. Large iron pots for the kitchen. I want 10. Spirit rice, spirit flour, spirit pork. Prepare enough for 300 people for 3 months. Matching bedding and straw mats. Also 300 sets. The clerk finally sat up straight. He looked at Chen Chang'an like he was looking at an idiot, and was even amused to the point of laughing. This Taoist friend. You ran to the 10,000 Treasures Pavilion to find amusement? The clerk reached out to grab a broom. All these things you reported are large-scale sect goods. At the very least, they cost 30 high-grade spirit stones. Even if I took that old skeleton next to you apart and sold him, he wouldn't be worth it. The speech came to an abrupt halt. Clatter. 30 glittering, colorful stones were roughly pushed onto the counter by Chen Chang'an, piling into a small hill. The rich spiritual energy filled half the shop instantly. The clerk froze on the spot. His Adam's apple rolled violently, making a clicking, strange sound, and his legs began to shake. Call your manager out. Chen Chang'an didn't stop tapping the table. A sound of tables and chairs overturning came from the back hall. Manager Wang of the branch store ran out. He was in such a hurry that his right shoe flew off directly, only wearing one sock, and he slid 3 feet on the wooden floor, stopping steadily in front of Chen Chang'an. Oh my, honored guest, rare guest. The manager slapped the stuttering clerk on the face, and then extended his short legs to kick him away. Guest, this kid is new, a temporary worker. I'll fire him later. Don't be angry. The fat on his face squeezed together into a ball as he smiled. The goods the honored guest wants. Our shop has them all in stock. We will arrange for immortal cranes to deliver them to your door immediately. Shipping is free. Before tonight. Delivered to the Azure Cloud sect main peak. Manager Wang's hand, which was moving the abacus beads rapidly, paused. He looked up, confirming he hadn't heard wrong. Azure Cloud sect, is there a problem? No, absolutely not. Manager Wang patted his chest with a loud thud, his face full of a smile mixed with flattery and shock. Honored guest, to be honest with you, this one big order of yours almost emptied the warehouse of my remote little branch. You are absolutely our most esteemed customer in the Eastern Branch now. In the future, when you come to get goods, there is a 20% discount on everything. Manager Wang rubbed his fat hands, trying his best to curry favor. In the future, as long as it's what you want, even if the resource limit of my little shop isn't enough, old Wang, even if I have to beg for privileges from the superior general store, shameless and thick-skinned, I will definitely mobilize the treasures for you. Half an hour later, 3 large-sized gray-feathered immortal cranes, dragging carts filled with supplies, soared into the sky. Bai Yaoyao rode on the neck of the immortal crane in the lead, cheering loudly while holding candied haws in her hand. Uncle Fu hugged the wing root of the second immortal crane tightly, his face deathly pale with fear, already having drafted his last words in his stomach several times. Chen Chang'an leaned diagonally on the cargo box at the very end, crossing his legs. Li Dania's resettlement fee cost 5 high-grade stones. Purchasing materials cost 35 high-grade spirit stones. Not even half of one top-grade spirit stone was spent. Once those 300 or 400 bottom-level rogue cultivators come up the mountain to register, tomorrow the system will settle the accounts again. As soon as I open my eyes, it will be hundreds of top-grade spirit stones credited. Then let's see how this fat manager cries to the general store and begs for cargo privileges. In the evening, the sunset dyed the main peak of the Azure Cloud sect orange-red. Chen Chang'an stood at the entrance of the main hall, looking at the flow of people winding up the mountain road. A foxtail grass he didn't know where he had found hanging from his mouth. Li Dania walked at the very front of the team, his voice already hoarse, but he was still pulling his raspy voice to maintain order. One after another. Pay attention. Don't step on the heels of the person in front. The queue was very long, but less than Chen Chang'an had imagined. He counted roughly, probably 200 and some. Bai Yaoyao moved a small bench and sat on the threshold, clutching a large bundle of newly bought candied haws in her arms, counting heads while gnawing on them. 1, 2, 3, senior brother. So many people. Chen Chang'an's brows twitched slightly. Li Daniu settled the team and ran up the steps in 2 or 3 strides, kneeling on one knee. Sect leader. This subordinate has not disgraced the mission. A total of 217 people were recruited, all brought here. Chen Chang'an chewed the foxtail grass, his gaze scanning the crowd on the mountain road. Ragged clothes, sallow and emaciated, quite a few missing arms and legs, wrapped in black-stained bandages. But compared to the walking corpses he saw in the marketplace, at least there was a bit more light in the eyes of this group of people. At least 300 or 400 surged over from the marketplace. Why did you only recruit 200 and some? Li Daniu scratched the back of his head. Sect leader. This subordinate checked. These 200 plus people, although their cultivation is low, and there are many disabilities, their spirit root aptitude is barely acceptable, and with a little cultivation, they should at least be able to reach foundation establishment. The rest of them are really 5-element trash spirit roots shattered, and some are simply mortal constitutions. Recruiting them in is just a waste of sect resources. Chen Chang'an's face darkened. Are those mortals? Are those trash spirit roots? That's my daily top-grade spirit stone. Chen Chang'an spat out the foxtail grass with a tui sound, taking a step forward. Daniu, here, when you were a child, patting your chest and telling your parents that you wanted to be a scientist when you grew up. Did your parents say you had poor aptitude? Li Daniu was stunned, the expression on his face stiffening. What scientist? Chen Chang'an walked 2 steps down the steps, with his back to him. Those 5-element trash spirit roots you mentioned. Spirit roots shattered, and whatever mortal constitutions, they now, or rather when they were young, also had dreams of cultivation. It's this world that beat them into pieces of trash. They didn't choose it themselves. Chen Chang'an turned around. I opened the Azure Cloud sect, not a mining pit for the Holy Land. We don't pick and choose. Those who can cultivate, we take. Those who can't cultivate, we take too. If the spirit roots are trashed, we can nourish them. If the cultivation is gone, we can practice it. For those who really can't practice, go to the kitchen to burn fire. Go to the sect gate to feed chickens. As long as they enter my Azure Cloud sect, they are all inseparable. Precious property. Living people have value. No one is trash. The mountain wind blew across the main hall square. The whole place was deathly silent. Li Daniu froze on the spot, his fingers rubbing unconsciously and fiercely on a hole in his Taoist robe. This remark by the young sect leader sounds uplifting, but it cannot be put into practice. The cultivation world emphasizes that the strong eat the weak. Resources are wished to be split into 8 petals. Even a single piece of the lowest grade bigu pill requires spending fragmented spirit stones to exchange for it. Why recruit a group of mortals without even sensing energy to the mountain? Can't mine, can't draw talismans, mouths open every day asking for food and drink, and still have to pay 10 low-grade spirit stones as base salary every month. This business, even the 4 major holy lands wouldn't be able to handle such extravagance. Reason told him, doing it like this, the sect would sooner or later be eaten into bankruptcy. Li Daniu stiffened his neck, just about to bring out this iron law of the strong eating the weak in the cultivation world to advise him to stop. On the mountain road, a few rogue cultivators in the front row heard these words. A middle-aged man with a missing right arm turned his head abruptly, his one arm covering his eyes tightly, his shoulders shaking violently. Behind him, an old woman with gray hair holding a thin child, her lips twitching. Suppressed sobs broke out in the queue. First one person, then 2, 3, finally, more than half the team was wiping away tears. The suppressed sobs intertwined, hitting Li Daniu's eardrums heavily. Li Daniu looked at the man with the missing arm, then looked at his own missing arm covered in black patterns. The advice that reached his lips, all got stuck in his throat. This group of people is trash in the eyes of the cultivation world. He, Li Daniu, is one too. Sect leader. Li Daniu wiped the mud off his face with his rough hands, speaking in a coarse voice. I, Daniu, am a rough person. I don't understand business profit or loss, but I listen to you. As long as there is food to eat, as long as they enter the gate of our Azure Cloud sect, even if it's a dog, I have to teach it how to guard the mountain gate well. Alright, Daniu, I know what you mean. What you said also makes sense. We only have these few mountain peaks right now, and they can't house too many people. Chen Chang'an turned sideways, looking back and pointing at the mountain of cargo piled behind the main hall. The goods delivering immortal cranes from the 10,000 treasures pavilion were quite efficient. 300 sets of bedding, 300 sets of Taoist robes, 5,000 blue stone bricks, 10 large iron pots, plus rice, flour, and dried meat piled up like a grain warehouse, all stacked in the backyard. Get these 200 plus people settled today first. As for the rest, we'll talk after we expand our territory. Chen Chang'an tucked his hands into his sleeves. Uncle Fu, the old servant is here. Uncle Fu poked his head out from behind the pile of goods, wearing a quilt on his head. You and Daniu divide decide the work. You are responsible for registration, recording every person's name, age, cultivation level, and spirit root attributes clearly, and enter them into our sect roster. Dainyu is responsible for housing arrangements, organizing the supplies well, and distributing them. Clean up that row of old houses behind the main peak first, and if there's not enough room, pitch tents. We'll build new ones tomorrow. Get the food cooking. Everyone eats a full meal tonight. Yes, the two replied in unison. Uncle Fu dug out a yellowed booklet and a balding brush from some unknown corner, brought a table, and sat down at the entrance of the main hall. Li Dainyu ran to the mountain path, and started shouting, moving the team toward the backyard. Chen Chang'an leaned against the door frame of the main hall, watching the ragged figures pass by one. Some nodded to him in greeting, some lowered their heads, not daring to look at him. When a teenager leaning on a wooden stick passed by him, he suddenly stopped, bowed deeply, and then limped to follow the team. Bai Yaoyao moved her little stool to Chen Chang'an's side, looked up at him, and then looked at the team. Senior brother, will they all live in our house from now on? Then are there enough candied haws to go around? They only eat rice. They don't eat candied haws. All the candied haws are yours. Bai Yaoyao nodded with satisfaction, and continued to bury her head in gnawing her candied haws. When night fell, all 10 large iron pots in the backyard were set up. The fragrance of rice filled the entire main peak. 200+ rogue cultivators squatted in the courtyard holding bowls, many crying as they ate. They didn't wipe their tears, just let them fall into their bowls, swallowing them mixed with the rice. Uncle Fu sat at the entrance of the main hall, writing vigorously, registering the roster. Name, Zhang Taizhu, spirit root aptitude. The man's face flushed red, his voice trembling. Waste roots, cultivation level, 2nd level of qi refining. Uncle Fu looked up, glanced at the man in front of him who was as thin as a bamboo pole, hesitated for a moment, and put brush to paper. Zhang Taizhu, 2nd level of qi refining, spirit roots, pending recovery. Next, Wang Xiulan, with a child. Spirit roots? I don't have spirit roots. I'm a mortal. The woman nervously protected the child behind her. Uncle Fu glanced at Chen Chang'an leaning against the door frame in the distance. Put brush to paper. Wang Xiulan, mortal, assigned to the miscellaneous affairs hall. What is the child's name? Wang Xiaohu, 3 years old, wood spirit root. Uncle Fu wrote the name neatly. On the last line of the roster, he drew a heavy stroke. Number of people registered in the sect, 221. Uncle Fu closed the booklet, carefully blowing on the ink to dry it. 37 years. The roster of the Azure Cloud sect had never had so many names before. Chen Chang'an walked over, took the roster and flipped through it. 217 newly recruited people, plus him, Uncle Fu, Bai Yaoyao, Li Dainyu, a total of 221 people. Tomorrow's system settlement, 221 top-grade spirit stones. Chen Chang'an handed the roster back to Uncle Fu, and turned to walk into the depths of the main hall. Passing by the corner of the wall, he saw Li Dainyu shoveling rice into his mouth with a bowl bigger than his face, taking a large mouthful, and wiping his red eyes with his greasy sleeve. Chen Chang'an didn't disturb him, walking straight through the main hall. Along the way, vague sounds of noise came from outside the main hall, the clatter of pots and bowls, occasionally mixed with a few laughs. This dilapidated sect that had been dead for half a year, seemed to finally have some signs of life. Entering the sect leader's residence behind the main hall, he lay down on the bed mat. Bai Yaoyao secretly followed him in, huddling beside him with the leftover stick of her candied haws, and soon emitted even breathing. Chen Chang'an closed his eyes, calculating tomorrow's plan in his head. The daily income of 221 top-grade spirit stones was already very impressive, but to expand the sect, repair the spiritual veins, and equip everyone with cultivation resources, the more spirit stones, the better. Of course, he needed more people, and to house more people, he needed more territory. More territory. The next morning, Chen Chang'an was woken up by Bai Yaoyao's snoring. The little girl didn't know when she had rolled over, her 2 short legs draped over his neck, the bun on her head pressing against the back of his head, and sticky sugar from eating candied haws last night still hanging on the corner of her mouth. The snoring was loud, the lung capacity of a peak foundation establishment cultivator vibrating with spiritual energy, shaking the broken wooden bed until it creaked. Chen Chang'an pulled the little girl's legs off his neck, and just as he turned over, the crisp notification sound in his mind rang on time. Daily settlement complete. Current sect-bound population, 221 people. Today's reward has been issued, 221 top-grade spirit stones, already deposited into the system space, can be withdrawn at any time. Chen Chang'an closed his eyes, tapping his fingers on the pillow. 221 top-grade spirit stones, converted to low-grade spirit stones, 221 million pieces. Yesterday, he was still sweating with excitement over 3 top-grade spirit stones. Today, upon opening his eyes, it was a daily turnover of over 200 million. Lying down, it automatically credits every day. The only operating cost was feeding these 200+ people. Chen Chang'an sat up, stuffing Bai Yaoyao back into the quilt. The little girl mumbled, "No scallions in the candied haws," rolled over, and continued to sleep. He pushed open the creaking wooden door of the sect leader's residence, and walked along the rear corridor toward the backyard. The sky was just beginning to brighten, mist rising from the valley, wrapping the main peak tightly. The scent of steamed spirit rice from last night still lingered in the air. Walking to the turn of the front hall, the scene outside the main hall made him stop. In the tents and old houses, most people were awake. No one was sleeping in, but no one was walking around either. At the entrance of the innermost tent, a thin, small teenager tucked the half bowl of leftover rice from last night into his chest, wrapping it in 3 layers of rags, clinging tightly to his chest. Next to it, the old house door was half open, and the stick-thin Zhang Taizhu was squatting in the corner of the courtyard, struggling to stack blue stone bricks with his only remaining left hand. The ground had already been swept spotless by him. Behind an old, crooked locust tree, 2 women were whispering in low voices. Sister Shilan, should we take advantage of the daylight and run down the mountain? Let's see a bit longer. See what? Where in this world is there such a good thing as food and housing and spirit stones? The mining boss at the spirit mine pit said the same thing last time, but after working for 3 months, I lost half my life. Wang Shilan hugged her child tightly, not daring to answer. Chen Chang'an stood under the corner of the wall for a moment, then retraced his steps. The stability bought by a full meal and clean bedding had ended. As soon as the day broke, this group of bottom-level birds of prey started scaring themselves again. Need to use strong medicine, strong enough that they wouldn't even dare to dream of it. Chen Chang'an returned to the main hall, finding Uncle Fu who was organizing the roster. Uncle Fu, ring the bell. Our bell is broken. Before the sect leader died, it was stolen by your senior brother and sold as waste copper. Then hit the pot. Hit the large iron pot used to cook rice last night, and have everyone gather in the square in front of the main hall. Everyone present, not a single one allowed to be missing. Yes, Uncle Fu replied, not daring to delay, quickly putting down his pen and dragging his lame leg away. Soon, the clang 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 sound of the iron pot rang out over the main peak. Li Daniu pulled his hoarse, broken gong-like throat and shouted all over the courtyard. Everyone out, gather in front of the main hall. The sect leader has something to say. Hurry, hurry. 200+ people filed out from every corner, gathering toward the square sluggishly. The formation was just as messy as when they climbed the mountain yesterday. A few rogue cultivators with ruined spirit roots were even more terrified and pale. An old man with a missing left ear quietly pulled on the sleeve of the person next to him. It's over. It must be to filter people out. The useless ones will all be kicked down the mountain today. I told you so. There is no free lunch in this world. No way, right? When we went up the mountain last night, didn't the sect leader say, no picking and choosing, we take even those who can't cultivate? Sigh. That's hard to say. Who would raise a group of trash? Whispers spread among the crowd, becoming more and more absurd. People in the front row were already cowering and moving backward. Chen Chang'an stood at the highest point of the main hall steps, taking in the expressions below. He didn't intend to give them time to continue with their wild thoughts. Directly flipping his wrist, the first low-grade spirit stone fell from his palm, smashing onto the bluestone ground in front of the steps. Ding! The sound was crisp and pleasant, followed by the second, the fifth, the 10th. The crisp sound of jade stones hitting the ground didn't attract anyone's attention at first, but soon, the sound of spirit stones hitting the ground drowned out the noise of the crowd. The 50th, the 100th, the 200th, countless low-grade spirit stones poured out from Chen Chang'an's palm continuously, like an endless rainstorm, madly hitting the ground. Clang clang clang, clang clang clang, clang clang clang, one after another, handful after handful. The whispers vanished completely. Everyone raised their heads. Everyone opened their mouths wide. The spirit stones were still pouring out. Chen Chang'an had the small change he had prepared in the system space, a total of 6,630 low-grade spirit stones, which was 10 low-grade spirit stones base salary per month for each of the 221 people, advanced for 3 months. As the piles of spirit stones grew, the spiritual energy concentration of the entire square suddenly rose to a higher level. White mist emerged from the gaps in the piles of spirit stones, flowing low on the bluestone ground, washing over everyone's ankles. Dazzling light danced on several hundred dirty faces. 200+ people stood stunned, collectively petrified. Some even forgot to breathe. Their chests flushed red until they took a violent gasp. Chen Chang'an tossed out the last spirit stone, and patted his empty hands. This is the cultivation resources for each of you for the next 3 months. His tone was as flat as reporting the menu for tonight. Base salary of 10 low-grade spirit stones per person per month. Advanced for 3 months all at once. Now line up, sign and press your thumbprint with one hand, and take the money with the other. The morning breeze blew across the main peak, and even the sound of a needle falling in the square could be heard clearly. The first one to break was Wang Shilan. Her knees went weak and she squatted on the ground, hugging her child tightly, opening her mouth and bursting into heart-rending sobs. She was immortal. 30 low-grade spirit stones. She couldn't exchange for that even if she picked waste stone dregs for 15 years outside the mine pit without eating or drinking. Mommy, don't cry. 3-year-old Wang Xiaohu was terrified, waving his little hand to wipe her tear-covered face. Zhang Taizhu, who was standing in the crowd, raised his head, his teeth biting until they rattled. He endured it for 3 seconds, but finally squatted down, burying his face in his thin arms and trembling violently. Thump. The teenager who climbed the mountain leaning on a wooden stick yesterday slammed his knees onto the ground, his forehead hitting the bluestone slab hard. With one person taking the lead, the rest of the people fell over one after another. The sound of knees hitting the ground echoed one after another. 200+ people knelt in unison before the glowing mountain of spirit stones. The suppressed sobs and unrestrained wailing mixed together, rushing straight into the sky. Li Daniu stood behind and to the side of Chen Chang'an, turning his face away in a panic, looking straight up at the clouds in the sky. Uncle Fu's hand holding the pen shook so much that he couldn't hold the brush, letting old tears fall onto the newly opened roster. Bai Yao Yao poked her head out from behind the hall door, rubbing her eyes. She looked at the people crying everywhere, took out the half-eaten candied haws from her arms, and ran to the old granny in the front row with her short legs. Granny, don't cry anymore. Here you go, eat. It's sweet. The granny took the candied haws with both hands, lying directly on the ground and sobbing uncontrollably. Chen Chang'an stood with his hands tucked into his sleeves, waiting quietly for a while, until the crying grew weaker, turning into intermittent sobs. Only then did he speak. All right, everyone get up. The crowd climbed up from the ground one after another, wiping their faces with dirty sleeves randomly. No one dared to look directly at the young sect leader on the steps. Ugly words first. Chen Chang'an held up a finger. This is not charity. This is labor compensation. If you take my money, you have to work for me. You enter my Azure Cloud sect, wear my Azure Cloud sect's clothing, eat my Azure Cloud sect's food, and you are my Azure Cloud sect's disciples. Chen Chang'an's gaze swept across several rogue cultivators in the front row with missing arms and legs. Poor aptitude. Trash spirit roots. It doesn't matter. Burning fire in the kitchen, farming or feeding pigs, patrolling the mountain or moving bricks. There is always work you can do. You must live like a human being. Let those who treat you as trash see clearly that you are not trash. You don't need charity or sympathy. You have dignity. You have value. You can stand up and earn spirit stones. Silence. The entire place was deathly silent. Zhang Taizhu clutched his remaining left hand tightly, his nails digging into his flesh. Wang Xiulan covered her mouth tightly, tears streaming down. The timing was right. Chen Chang'an tossed out the final big pie. Work hard. If the sect develops well after 3 months, I'll give everyone a bonus. In the crowd, an old man with half his front teeth missing summoned the courage to speak up. Sect leader, what is a bonus? Chen Chang'an spat out a few words. It means medium-grade spirit stones. Boom. The brains of 200 plus people exploded simultaneously. Medium-grade spirit stones. Did I hear that right? My god. I've never even seen what a medium-grade spirit stone looks like in my life. Medium-grade spirit stones. A peerless treasure that a bottom-level rogue cultivator couldn't even touch the edge of after a lifetime of mining. Long live the sect leader. Someone shouted at the top of their lungs, and in an instant, everyone's emotions went completely out of control. Willing to die for the Azure Cloud sect. Die for. The wave of sound rushed straight into the sky, startling a large flock of birds in the woods behind the main peak. Chen Chang'an turned around, and stepped over the threshold of the main hall. Li Daniu, with a flushed face, walked up quickly. Sect leader, I'll handle the spirit stone distribution and the signing of the thumbprints. Follow the rules. Chen Chang'an didn't look back. Uncle Fu will assist with the registration. Record clearly who took how much. The accounts must be perfectly clear. This subordinate understands. Li Daniu took the order, turned around, and roared with his broken throat, urging people to line up. Chen Chang'an walked through the dilapidated front hall, pushed open the wooden door of the sect leader's residence. In his previous life, working as a senior executive in a large company, holding an all-hands mobilization meeting, the effect at best was like this. Back then, drawing pies, team building, issuing bonuses, going through the process, cutting the budget, all made my heart ache terribly. Now, these 221 living people, as long as they remain on the roster and breathing, every morning, without fail, 221 top-grade spirit stones are credited automatically. The 6,000 plus low-grade spirit stones issued today don't even count as a drop in the bucket. Profits rolling back 100 or 1,000 times over. Truly a good business. A sound of small running footsteps came from behind him. Bai Yao Yao, holding a bald bamboo stick, crashed into him, grabbing his sleeve. Senior brother. Senior brother. There are so many people shouting long live outside. It's even livelier than New Year's down the mountain. That granny just now ate my candied haws. She was dropping little pearls while eating, saying it was sweet. Chen Chang'an reached out and pinched the bun on her head. Tomorrow, senior brother will buy out the whole stock, and buy you a cart full of candied haws. Yay! Bai Yao Yao jumped 3 feet high in place, and ran toward the backyard with her short legs to watch the excitement. Chen Chang'an had just straightened his body from the door frame, preparing to go back to the main hall to calculate the repair plan for the several abandoned side peaks, when dense footsteps suddenly came from below the mountain path, intermixed with the clatter of metal colliding. A large number of black silhouettes were climbing toward the main peak, along the bluestone steps quickly. Li Daniu sensed something wrong first, slapping the roster in his hand onto the table, and looking toward the mountain path. Sect leader. It's the people from the Mad Blade sect. There were about 30 visitors, fully armed, all in black sword robes. The middle-aged swordsman in the lead had a burly build, clutching a black iron broadsword sword in his right hand, his steps steady and powerful. Mad Blade Sect Leader, Zhou Taizhan. Peak Foundation Establishment Cultivation. Wang Hu followed half a step behind Zhou Taizhan, with a thick bandage wrapped around his bridge of the nose, his two remaining eye slits revealing a malicious joy. The rogue cultivators in the square who had just received their spirit stones suddenly stirred. Quite a few subconsciously clutched the spirit stones they had just received and shrank back. A heavy spiritual pressure spread out, and a few weak rogue cultivators in the front row went soft in the legs and sat on the ground. Zhou Tieshan's gaze swept over the low-grade spirit stones scattered all over the ground that hadn't been distributed yet, his brows furrowing imperceptibly. He stopped below the steps, thumping the blade heavily onto the bluestone slab. Little brat Chen. Zhou Tieshan's voice was loud and clear. Your master borrowed 10 medium-grade spirit stones from me 6 months ago to buy medicine. It was written clearly in black and white. Borrowing money requires repayment. It is only natural. Zhou Taizhan snorted coldly. Wang Hu reported back that you not only reneged on the debt, but also used some rock to break his nose bridge. Although my Mad Blade sect is small, I am not someone who can be slapped in the face at will. Today, either take money to repay the debt, or use the land deed as a mortgage. By the way, take out the rock you used to hit people with. I want to see what kind of hard currency it is. Chen Chang'an stood on the steps, hands tucked into his sleeves, looking down at Zhou Taizhan. This sect leader had plenty of confidence, but his words were somewhat restrained. The most critical thing was that he actually wanted to see what kind of rock it was. If Zhou Taizhan knew it was a top-grade spirit stone, he definitely wouldn't be in this attitude of coming to talk about rules and collect debt. Sect leader Zhou, Chen Chang'an spoke slowly. You came to collect debt. Did you bring enough change? What change? Yesterday I gave Wang Hu a top-grade spirit stone, asking him to deduct your debt of 100,000, and bring back the remaining 900,000 in low-grade spirit stones. Didn't he tell you? Zhou Taizhan was stunned. He turned his head to look at Wang Hu behind him. Wang Hu's body trembled violently, his gaze shifting. Zhou Tieshan's brows furrowed into a ball. What do you mean? Your master borrowed 10 medium-grade spirit stones from me while he was alive. According to the Immortal Alliance's rules, with principal and interest, it's at most 1,200 low-grade ones. Where did a debt of 100,000 come from? Chen Chang'an understood completely. Wang Hu, this grandson, had swindled both sides, turning the interest of 1,200 into 100,000 behind Zhou Tieshan's back, to line his own pockets. After getting beaten, he returned, and hid the top-grade spirit stone matter from the sect leader, using Zhou Taizhan as a gun. Chen Chang'an tucked his hands into his sleeves, his tone as casual as if discussing a small deal. Sect leader Zhou, I acknowledge the debt of those 10 medium-grade spirit stones. Zhou Tieshan's blade sank slightly, his brows relaxing a bit. Chen Chang'an's tone changed. But before that, I also want to discuss a business deal with you. He paused, his gaze crossing Zhou Tieshan's shoulder, and landing on the group of black-robed swordsmen behind him, sweeping across them one by one, like counting. I want to buy your entire Mad Blade sect. The mountain breeze blew into the square, making the swordsmen's black robes flutter. Zhou Tieshan's hand clutching the hilt froze in midair. By the edge of the square, the roster in Li Daniu's hand almost slapped onto his own face. Uncle Fu's hand holding the brush hovered in midair, the ink at the tip of the brush forming a line and dripping down, smearing into a black blob on the paper. Bai Yao Yao was squatting on the edge of the steps counting ants, tilting her head upon hearing the sound, not understanding much, and continuing to count. 200+ rogue cultivators raised their heads in unison. By the entire sect? Zhou Taizhan reacted for 2 seconds. Clang! The black iron broadsword was pulled violently from the crack in the bluestone slab. The blade stood upright, vibrating with a hum. The spiritual pressure of the Peak Foundation establishment poured out from the blade, pointing directly at Chen Chang'an's chest. A few rogue cultivators in the front row were hit by the aftermath, stumbling back several steps. Sect leader Chen, Zhou Tieshan's voice was extremely low. Wang Hu's affair was indeed my neglect, but you are being too insulting, aren't you? His thumb pressed against the back of the blade, his knuckles turning white. The Mad Blade sect may be poor and rotten, but it is the foundation I fought for with my own blades. These 30+ brothers under me have followed me for over 10 years. They are not livestock. They are not goods put on a shelf. Behind him, more than 30 swordsmen drew their blades in unison. The sound of iron blades leaving their sheaths was neat and uniform, exploding a series of crisp metallic sounds over the square. Li Daniu instinctively shielded by Yao Yao behind him. Uncle Fu's lame leg shook twice, his hand reaching for the broken sword under the table. Chen Chang'an didn't move, didn't retreat, didn't even pull his hands out of his sleeves. Sect leader Zhou, how much do you pay your brothers each month? Zhou Tieshan's face stiffened. This question came too suddenly, not matching any of the responses he had anticipated. Chen Chang'an didn't wait for him to answer, lifting his chin, and pointing to a young swordsman at the very front of the team. The swordsman was 20-something, so thin his cheekbones protruded, his Taoist robe cuffs worn into strips of cloth, clutching his sword, his knuckles trembling slightly. You, how much do you receive a month? The young swordsman subconsciously turned his head to look at Zhou Taizhan. Zhou Tieshan's face was ashen, but he didn't stop him. The swordsman swallowed his saliva, his voice astringent. Back. 3 low grade. Chen Chang'an pointed to the second one. What about you? 3. The third. 4. The fourth. 5th. When he asked an old brother with a face full full of scars. The man hesitated for a moment, as if a stone was stuck in his throat. 5. Pausing. But last month's is still owed. Once the words were out, the scarred man was frightened first, shutting his mouth and lowering his head violently, wishing he could stuff his head into his collar. The air in the square froze. Zhou Tieshan's back muscles tightened one by one, his hands gripping the sword hilt rattling. He didn't turn around. Chen Chang'an withdrew his finger, tilting his head to look at him. The total annual income of the Mad Blade sect, at most 1,000 or so low grade, subtracting personnel expenses, material loss. The annual portion silver turned over to the Immortal Alliance. Chen Chang'an extended a finger, and shook it left and right. How much can you, Zhou Taizhan, save at the end of the year? Likely you're even losing money, right? No one answered. Zhou Tieshan's chest heaved violently several times. His lips moved, but in the end, nothing came out. This silence was louder than any answer. The disciples behind him looked at each other. Some quietly retracted their swords by half an inch. Some lowered their heads. That old scarred brother opened his mouth, and then closed it again, his face full of bitterness. The 200+ rogue cultivators in the square looked at this scene. The expressions of those who had shrunk in the corners not daring to speak, gradually changed into subtle astonishment. The Mad Blade sect, which had come aggressively with 30+ people to draw blades and collect debt, was actually so poor that even the wages were in arrears. Chen Chang'an didn't continue to poke. He turned around, and walked slowly back to the top of the steps, hand reaching into his storage bag. 10 medium-grade spirit stones were pulled out by him one after another, neatly piled up on the edge of the steps. Spiritual energy overflowed, the luster gentle and moist. Quite a few people in the square gasped. Medium-grade spirit stones. 10 of them, just placed on the steps so casually. This is the 10 medium-grade spirit stones your master borrowed from you back then, returned in full. Chen Chang'an clapped his hands. The debt is cleared. Zhou Tieshan's pupils contracted violently. He stared at the 10 medium-grade spirit stones piled neatly on the steps, the hand clutching the hilt slowly loosening by half. He had prepared for the worst before climbing the mountain, either taking money, or taking the land deed, and if it didn't work, he would tear his face and fight. From beginning to end, he never thought that the other party would actually repay the money, and so crisp and cleanly. His Adam's apple rolled, just about to speak. Chen Chang'an's hand reached into the storage bag again. What he pulled out this time was still medium-grade spirit stones. 1, 2, 5, 10. Another 10 medium-grade spirit stones, piled next to the row of spirit stones just now. 20 medium-grade spirit stones placed on the steps, the spiritual energy almost condensing into mist. Zhou Tieshan's brows twisted fiercely. This is a resettlement fee. Chen Chang'an held up a finger, reporting them one by one. All members of the Mad Blade sect merged into the Azure Cloud sect. All disciples treated the same as existing Azure Cloud sect disciples. Monthly salary, 10 low-grade spirit stones. In the back row, a swordsman gasped. Food provided. Housing provided. Cultivation resources provided. More gasps. Those who join the sect today, 3 months advanced directly. 10. Monthly salary, 10 low-grade spirit stones. They only received 3 to 5 in the Mad Blade sect a month, and it was often in arrears. 10 low-grade spirit stones plus food, housing, and cultivation resources provided. The actual income directly increased by 3 or 4 times over, plus an advance of 3 months. The scarred old brother's iron sword shook violently in his hand, almost not holding it. The young swordsman's Adam's apple rolled up and down, the sound of him swallowing saliva frantically ringing clearly in the quiet square. Chen Chang'an looked at Zhou Taizhan last. As for you, sect leader Zhou, he paused. I am a person who cherishes talent. The Mad Blade sect could last 15 years in the desolate province without falling. You, Zhou Taizhan, have the ability. Come to the Azure Cloud sect. Become the hall master of the Law Enforcement Hall. Monthly salary, 5 high-grade spirit stones. Your blade is still your blade. Your brothers are still your brothers. The only difference is, in the future, when they follow you, they won't have to go hungry again. 5 high-grade, 50,000 low-grade. The hand Zhou Taizhan was holding the sword hilt with shook violently, his knuckles turning white. He clenched his teeth, his Adam's apple rolling several times, but he still didn't say a word. He had been a sect leader for 15 years, and his entire net worth put together had never reached 10 high-grade ones. The 32 disciples behind him were completely stunned. First deathly silence, then suppressed gasps for air one after another. The young swordsman's iron sword clattered onto the bluestone slab. He lowered his head to look at it, and then looked up at Chen Chang'an, his brain buzzing, even forgetting to react to bend down and pick up the sword. Zhou Taizhan turned slowly. He looked at these 32 brothers of his. Taoist robes with broken threads, iron blades with rolled edges, a few young ones so thin their chins were sharp, an old brother's arm bandage yellow and black, not knowing how long it hadn't been changed. Sect leader, cannot agree. A hoarse howl came from the corner of the square. Wang Hu had crawled up from the ground at some point, the bandage on his nose bridged crooked to one side, his face covered in blood and grime. He knelt halfway on the ground, his voice sharp and urgent. This Chen kid definitely has a trick. A hairy boy at the qi refining stage. Where would he get so many spirit stones? It must be a lie. Zhou Taizhan didn't even turn his head, kicking his right foot backward violently, the tip of his shoe accurately kicking Wang Hu in the chest. A muffled sound. Wang Hu flew out like a broken sack, knocking over 2 wooden frames, rolling into the mud pit in the furthest corner of the square, twitching on the ground, never climbing up again. Just like that, he choked to death. Zhou Taizhan retracted his foot. He slowly switched the black iron broadsword from his right hand to both hands, holding it horizontally on his palms. Then, he slammed one knee onto the bluestone slab. Crack. The slab cracked a fissure. Zhou Taizhan. His voice was hoarse. Leads all disciples of the Mad Blade sect, from today on, to join the Azure Cloud sect. Behind him, the scarred old brother was the first to react. He shoved his sword back into the scabbard, swish, slammed one knee onto the ground, cupped his fists and lowered his head, hitting it the hardest, sounding the loudest, followed by the second, the third. The young swordsman fumbled to pick up the dropped iron sword from the ground, shoved it back into the scabbard, and when he knelt down, his knee just hit a scattered spirit stone, hurting so much he bared his teeth, but he didn't dare to move away. The 32 swordsmen knelt on one knee in unison, black robes fluttering, iron armor clanking. In Chen Chang'an's mind, the system notification sounds exploded like a string of firecrackers. Zhou Taizhan successfully recorded in the sect roster. Zhao Dubiao successfully recorded in the sect roster. Sun Ergu successfully recorded in the sect roster. Xian Shaolu successfully recorded in the sect roster. Current sect-bound population, 253 people. Chen Chang'an reached out and took the broadsword. Heavy, it really weighed on his hand. He handed it back to Zhou Taizhan exactly as it was. The blade is still your blade. You are now the Hall Master of the Law Enforcement Hall of the Azure Cloud sect. Chen Chang'an patted his shoulder. The Azure Cloud sect's fists. You will hold them in the future. Zhou Taizhan took the blade with both hands, slowly standing up. His eye sockets were red, his Adam's apple rolling again and again, but the tears never fell. In the square, 200+ rogue cultivators watched with their own eyes. The Mad Blade sect leader, who had brought people up the mountain to draw blades and collect debt a quarter of an hour ago, kneel before that young sect leader. Da-da-da. Small footsteps sounded from behind the steps. Bai Yao Yao bounced out. She looked up at Zhou Taizhan, who was 2 heads taller than her, tilted her buns to examine him for 2 seconds, and then pulled a crumpled half-stick of Candied Ha's bamboo stick from her sleeve, with a crooked hawthorn sticked on it, obviously gnawed, with little tooth marks on it. Uncle, here you go, eat. It's sweet. Bai Yao Yao stood on her tiptoes, trying hard to raise the bamboo stick high. From now on, you are also one of our family. Zhou Taizhan lowered his head. He looked at the hawthorn stained with saliva and dust, extending his palm full of calluses, cautiously taking the bamboo stick. Thank you. The voice was so hoarse it was almost inaudible. Chen Chang'an turned and walked into the main hall, fingers tapping in his sleeve. 253 people. Tomorrow, 253 top-grade spirit stones would be credited, and the mountain peak originally occupied by the Mad Blade sect, now also had the surname Chen. Headcount in hand, territory in hand, but it's still far from enough. He needed 500, 1,000, 10,000, endless headcounts, but this account cannot just be calculated on the good side. With more people, eating, drinking, defecating, sleeping, all have to be managed. The Azure Cloud sect only has these few broken peaks now. 200 people squeezed in the backyard already have no room to turn around. Before recruiting the next batch, must have a place to house them first. Furthermore, in this cruel cultivation world where human life is like grass, he holds the bottom card of an bottomless pit of top-grade spirit stones in his chest. But the sect combat power only has a peak foundation establishment little girl, Bai Yao Yao, whose growth was forcibly pulled up by spirit stones, truly encountering a hard nut that turns green with envy. This little bit of force is simply not enough to look at. Territory, thugs, must quickly get these 2 hard indicators done. Only then can this strongest enterprise in the cultivation world continue to grow bigger and stronger. Approaching noon, looking at the sect account sent by Uncle Fu, Chen Chang'an felt his temples throbbing. A stack of crooked grass paper, income and expenditure all mixed up in a pile. If the numbers weren't enough, just draw Zheng characters to make up for them. The procurement expenses for 300 Taoist robes were written under the spirit rice column. The spending on 10 large iron pots directly classified into the pill category. Uncle Fu, what does this iron pot have to do with pills? Uncle Fu rubbed his hands, his old face reddening. Young sect leader, this old servant doesn't know many characters. I don't know how to write the pot character, but I know how to write the pill character, so I just recorded it there. Chen Chang'an took a deep breath. When distributing spirit stones just now, did the accounts match? Uncle Fu hurriedly turned his head to look at Li Daniu outside the door. Li Daniu was squatting on the steps gnawing on a dry biscuit, almost choking when hearing this, pounding his chest and coughing violently. Sect leader, it matched, it's just that. There was a small error in the middle. How big of an error? 10 counted as 12. Luckily Zhang Taizhu next to him reminded me. Otherwise 20+ would have been issued extra. Chen Chang'an slapped the stack of grass paper onto the table. level. Daily turnover of 221 top-grade spirit stones, converted to over 200 million low-grade spirit stones. With such a huge cash flow, the accounts rely on drawing zheng characters. Distributing money relies on counting with fingers. In the previous life, this is called a financial black hole. In the cultivation world, this is called waiting to be sold and helping count the money. He needed an accountant. Not a common accountant who only knows how to use an abacus to record running accounts, but a professional talent who can plan the entire sect's resource allocation, personnel salaries, and material procurement clearly. In previous life's words, Chief Financial Officer, Dainyu, are there any people who can calculate accounts among those you recruited? No cultivation limit, as long as they can calculate clearly. Li Dainyu's action of gnawing on the biscuit stopped, scratching his head and thinking for a while. Sect leader, I guess these rogue cultivators can barely recognize characters, let alone calculate accounts. However, he leaned closer, lowering his voice. Today is the beginning of the month. There is a ground stall auction in the marketplace at night. Rogue cultivators take out the broken cultivation techniques and wasted pill recipes they have saved to exchange for spirit stones. That place is mixed with dragons and snakes. All kinds of people are there. Before, when I was weaving straw sandals in the marketplace, I heard people say that occasionally a few figures who suffered mishaps from large sects emerge at the auction. They have ability, but they are mixing miserably. If the sect leader is looking for an accountant, might as well go there to try your luck. Chen Chang'an stood up. Good. Auction. Lots of people. Well informed. And it's a place where bottom-level rogue cultivators huddle. Finding talent is one aspect. Even if I can't find any, buying some cultivation techniques is good too. 200 plus new disciples don't even have a decent basic cultivation technique. Must purchase a batch of basic cultivation techniques in bulk. And Yao Yao must also improve her strength as soon as possible. Let's go. Down the mountain. Chen Chang'an patted the heavy storage bag in his sleeve, turned and walked out. Uncle Fu, Yao Yao, come with me. Dainyu, stay and guard the gate. Watch the new disciples clean up the old houses in the back mountain. The accommodation area must be sorted out today. Li Dainyu stood up briskly, patting the biscuit crumbs off his hands. Sect leader, don't worry. Bai Yao Yao heard the words, down the mountain, her two ears standing up like a rabbit's, rushing out from the sect leader's residence, grabbing Chen Chang'an's arm. By candied haws. By a large portion. Large portion. The three went down the mountain. Uncle Fu muttered incessantly along the way, saying there were many scammers at the auction. Those who sold inferior as superior. Those who raised prices on the spot. All kinds of tricks. And there were some people from small sects specially crouching around the auction, watching things the rogue cultivators just traded, and robbing them once they left the marketplace. The auction was set on an open ground in the middle of a dried-up riverbed, under a shed built with rags. Dozens of rogue cultivators squatted on the ground setting up stalls and shouting. Dirty coarse cloth was laid on the ground, with various rusty magical tools, curled and yellowed cultivation technique remnants, and some pill bottles whose quality couldn't even be distinguished. The center of the venue was crowded with several hundred people, mostly rogue cultivators, occasionally mixed with a few small sect disciples wearing slightly tidier clothes. Bai Yao Yao stood on tiptoe to peer into the crowd, mumbling, why isn't there anyone selling candied haws? Chen Chang'an took the two and mingled in the back row, his gaze scanning the venue. The things on most stalls were all bottom-level goods, incomplete cultivation techniques, scrapped magical tools, bits and pieces. But for the 200-plus new disciples of the Azure Cloud sect who didn't even have introductory cultivation techniques, even the most basic body-tempering cultivation technique was 100 times better than practicing by luck empty-handed. He was just calculating how to sweep up all the usable cultivation techniques in one go, when his peripheral vision caught sight of a somewhat eye-catching figure standing 7 or 8 steps away from him. A gray cloak with the hood pulled very low, covering most of the face. A gray skirt washed until it was pale. The cuffs worn into fuzzy edges. The back was straight. In a place like the marketplace, rogue cultivators all bowed their waists and shrunk their necks, wishing they could cram themselves into the gaps in the ground. This person happened to stand like a pine tree, standing out of place in a crowd of hunched and humped people. The auction started quickly. A middle-aged fat man with a face full of horizontal meat swaggered to the center of the field. The fat man held up a yellow-covered booklet with curled edges, shouting at the surroundings. The first item up for auction. Basic body tempering cultivation technique. Burning body formula. Practice it to perfection. Bronze skin and iron bones. Invulnerable to swords and spears. Starting price. 3 low-grade spirit stones. Chen Chang'an's eyes lit up. Body tempering cultivation technique. This was exactly what he urgently needed. Starting at 3 low-grade stones. It was ridiculously cheap. Just as he was about to bid. Wait a moment. A cold, clear female voice cut in from the right. The gray-skirted woman in the cloak took a step forward, reaching out to lift a corner of her hood slightly, revealing half a face with sharp contours, a clean jawline, and thinly pursed lips. This burning body formula is stolen loot from the Red Flame sect storehouse. The whole hall was silent for a moment. The smile on the fat man's face froze. The woman didn't give him time to react, continuing to speak. And it's an incomplete copy. The original has 7 levels in total, but this one only copies up to the 3rd level, with the last 4 levels completely missing. When you reach the bottleneck of the 3rd level, without subsequent techniques to connect and guide the energy, the spiritual power will surge in reverse course through the meridians in the dantian. At best, you'll suffer cultivation deviation. At worst, you'll explode on the spot. She turned her head, and glanced at the surrounding rogue cultivators who were already taking out their storage bags to bid, spending 3 spirit stones to buy a death warrant. I advise you all to save your money for a coffin. Everyone pulled their hands back in unison. A young rogue cultivator who was eager to try just a moment ago hid his extended arm behind his back, his face deathly pale. The venue suddenly exploded with noise. Damn, stolen goods? No wonder it was so cheap. It turns out to be a trap. Luckily I didn't bid. Nearly lost my life. The fat man's face turned livid, his mung bean-sized eyes staring fixedly at the woman, the fat on his neck trembling a few times. Surname Sue, stop your slander here. This technique of mine was acquired through proper channels. What evidence do you have that it's stolen goods? The traces of the seal from the Red Flame sect storehouse are still on the cover. Next time you accept stolen goods, remember to scrape off the marks. The woman raised her hand, and threw off the cloak's hood entirely. A head of ink-black hair cascaded over her shoulders, her face cold and clear. She looked to be in her early 20s, with a pride in her brows that had been polished by hardship but not worn away. Several older rogue cultivators recognized her, and began to whisper among themselves. Isn't this Su Jinlian? Didn't she enter the profound heaven Holy Land? I heard she even did accounting in the Holy Land for a few days. Now she's been kicked out, apparently offending some elder. What a pity. The profound heaven Holy Land is one of the 4 major holy lands. Even an outer sect disciple is a phoenix among people, now reduced to begging in the marketplace. Chen Chang'an's ears twitched. Profound heaven Holy Land. Accounting. He thought of the stack of papers in his sleeve covered in check marks for bookkeeping, raised his head to look at the woman in the center of the field who had angered the middle-aged fat man to the point of redness. Chen Chang'an rubbed his chin. Interesting. The atmosphere in the center of the field deteriorated sharply. The fat man, exposed in public, couldn't save face, waving his fat palms. 3 burly men stood out from behind him, each one broad-shouldered and thick-waisted, their spiritual energy radiating, the weakest being at the 8th level of qi refining. The fat man took 2 steps forward, his fat face filled with malice. Su Jinlian, you're just a stray dog kicked out by the profound heaven Holy Land, driven to my marketplace to beg after embezzling spirit stones, and you dare to sabotage my business? He stretched out a thick, short finger, almost poking it to the tip of Su Jinlian's nose. If you don't kowtow 3 times to me in front of everyone today, and apologize, saying everything you just said was bullshit, do you believe me when I say I'll make sure you don't even have a place to beg? Su Jinlian stepped back half a step, her face changing slightly. Her cultivation was only at the 6th level of qi refining, facing 3 8th level qi refining thugs. She had no chance of winning in a direct fight, but after stepping back half a step, she didn't retreat anymore. Every word I said is a fact. If you think I'm spouting nonsense, feel free to practice this technique to the 3rd level on the spot and see. The fat man was choked until his face turned purple, shouting violently, take her down for me. The 3 burly men moved simultaneously, their spiritual energy wrapped in fist wind, lunging forward. Su Jinlian gritted her teeth, her right hand already touching the shabby iron sword at her waist. Then, she heard a lazy voice from behind her. Wait a minute. Chen Chang'an stepped out of the crowd, tossing a top-grade spirit stone in his hand, shaking it at the fat man. This person. He tossed the top-grade spirit stone into the air. Caught it. I'll protect. I'll protect. As soon as these 3 words were spoken, the noise within a 10-yard radius ceased instantly. Hundreds of eyes turned in unison. The fat man paused for half a beat, looking Chen Chang'an up and down. Ragged Taoist robe with patch upon patch, a crooked coarse cloth storage bag hanging at his waist, the cloth shoes on his feet also looking like they had been worn for a long time. Pfft. The fat man laughed, throwing his head back and laughing loudly, the fat on his face trembling in waves. Yo, another sucker popped up. The fat man stretched out his fat, short finger, pointing vaguely at the top-grade spirit stone in Chen Chang'an's hand. Kid, I have a whole row of those fakes under my stove at home, dressed like a ghost. You're worthy of acting rich at my auction. The 3 thugs retracted their fists that were closing in on Su Jinlian, turning collectively toward Chen Chang'an. The burly one tilted his head, scanning Chen Chang'an from head to toe with a look like watching a monkey show. Boss, I've seen plenty of this kind of poor wretch, polishing a firefly stone to pass it off as a top-grade spirit stone. A rogue cultivator at the north end of the marketplace did the same last month, and we broke 3 of his ribs. Su Jinlian turned her head, her gaze quickly scanning Chen Chang'an's patch-covered Taoist robe. You don't need to get involved in this muddy water. The voice was calm, the tone without fluctuation. Chen Chang'an didn't look at the 3 thugs who were ready to fight. I'm a bit curious. You're at the qi refining stage, and you've ended up like this. Why must you jump out and expose him? What's in it for you? Aiding the poor? Saving a rogue cultivator you've never met? Su Jinlian frowned. Humph. The technique in that fat man's hand was inferior goods the Red Flame sect gave to the profound heaven Holy Land half a year ago. This remnant scroll was verified and written off by my own hands. According to the rules, it had to be burned on the spot. Su Jinlian's back straightened. Waste that should have been destroyed has appeared here. Although I am no longer in the profound heaven Holy Land, I cannot stand these rotten accounts and fake records. Hearing the other party's words, Chen Chang'an was surprised for a second. He carefully scrutinized the woman in the gray dress beside him. For the sake of the authenticity authenticity of accounts. For the sake of the rules of trade, knowing she couldn't beat the other party, she still chose to expose it in public. This is no busybody saint. This kind of person who cannot tolerate a grain of sand in her eyes, and is obsessed with rules, is simply a top-grade financial director tailored by the heavens for the Azure Cloud sect. Awesome. Seeing that Chen Chang'an neither took the bait nor left, the fat man thought he was chickening out and just saving face, so his courage swelled up immediately. With a wave of his fat hand, the three thugs changed their target, releasing their spiritual energy and pressing toward Chen Chang'an. The spiritual pressure of 3 8th-level chi refining layers stacked together forced the nearby rogue cultivators who were watching the fun to turn pale, stepping back several steps in a row. Bai Yaoyao poked her head out from behind Chen Chang'an, still chewing the bald candied ha bamboo stick, blinking her big eyes as she scrutinized Su Jinlian. Uncle Fu grabbed Chen Chang'an's sleeve nervously, lowering his voice. Young sect leader, the water in this place is deep. Chen Chang'an patted Uncle Fu's hand gently, stepping forward. Don't worry. The fat man spread his 2 thick legs, one hand on his waist and the other pointing at Chen Chang'an's nose tip. Kid, do you know who I am? A rogue cultivator caused trouble at this auction last month, and the next day, he was thrown into the mine pit to feed the earthfire lizards. Do you want to follow in his footsteps? The faces of the surrounding rogue cultivators watching the fun changed in unison, retreating into a large open area. The old rogue cultivators who had been whispering just a moment ago pulled each other and retreated toward the alley entrance, wishing they could shrink their heads into their collars. Chen Chang'an yawned, turning his head to look at Bai Yaoyao beside him, who was using the bamboo stick to poke mud. Yaoyao. Bai Yaoyao raised her little face. Let this uncle feel it. Bai Yaoyao tilted her head, not really understanding what feel it meant, but she was obedient. Whatever senior brother said, just do it. The spiritual pressure of the Peak Foundation establishment crushed out from the 8-year-old girl. No signs, no build-up, just like turning on a faucet. Whoosh! The spiritual energy release of the 3 thugs was shattered instantly. The weakest one knelt into the mud on the spot, his iron sword flying 3 feet away. The other 2 stubbornly braced themselves to stay standing, but their legs were trembling like chaff, teeth clattering. The fat man plopped down onto the ground, splashing a puddle of mud beneath his bottom, smearing half his trousers. His mouth opened and closed and opened, not a single word coming out. An 8-year-old girl. Peak Foundation establishment. The brains of several hundred people in the venue exploded simultaneously, but no one dared to make a sound. Bai Yaoyao withdrew her spiritual pressure, using the bamboo stick to scratch her buns, turning to look at Chen Chang'an. Senior brother, is it felt? Finished. The fat man knew how to bend and stretch, sitting in the mud for 3 seconds, the last string in his brain finally clicking into place. He crawled up from the ground with hands and feet, his crotch covered in mud, turning around and grabbing the collars of the 3 thugs, scrambling to escape toward the depths of the alley. After running more than 10 steps, the fat man's voice drifted back from afar, sharp and thin, like a different person from the one who was just acting like a bully. Great master, please take your time. The little one has eyes but didn't recognize Mount Tai. There's an emergency at home. I'm leaving first. The shadows disappeared at the alley corner. The venue was quiet enough to hear the bubbling of water being boiled at the spirit rice noodle stall. Hundreds of eyes stared fixedly at Chen Chang'an, able to take out top-grade spirit stones, accompanied by an 8-year-old girl at the peak of Foundation establishment, wearing a patched Taoist robe. Who would believe it? Could it be a young master from a large family out on a secret visit? Su Jinlian stood still on the spot. Her gaze shifted from Chen Chang'an to Bai Yaoyao, and then back again, stopping for 2 breaths, silence for 3 breaths. She reached out, bowing to Chen Chang'an, her tone flat. I am Su Jinlian, formerly an outer sect disciple of the profound heaven holy land. Before Chen Chang'an could answer, Bai Yaoyao bounced out from behind him, looking up with her sugar-stained little face, blinking her big eyes as she stared at Su Jinlian for 3 seconds. Big sister is so beautiful. The little girl clapped her hands together, her voice crisp enough for the whole alley to hear. I want to marry big sister as my wife. The surrounding rogue cultivators gasped in unison. Su Jinlian's shoulders stiffened, and that icy, cold posture of strangers keep away showed a noticeable stutter. Chen Chang'an remained calm, reaching out to press Bai Yaoyao's bun, and pushing her behind him. The child is talking nonsense. Please excuse her. After the fat man left, after a short break, the auction continued, but Chen Chang'an was no longer in the mood to participate. Just as he was about to speak about serious matters, gurgle, gurgle, a loud and clear sound, came from the direction of Su Jinlian's waist, exceptionally piercing. Su Jinlian froze, her face turning from cold white to crimson red, at a very fast speed, all the way to the roots of her ears. Her teeth gnashed, her jaw tight, her fists inside her sleeves gripped until her knuckles turned white. That posture of not owing favors or accepting charity was dismantled cleanly by a growling stomach. Chen Chang'an didn't call her out, turning and walking toward the main road of the marketplace. Let's eat first. We can talk while we eat. Su Jinlian stood still for 2 seconds. She subconsciously raised her chin, tossed her head, and followed. The posture was restrained, the steps fast. In a corner of the marketplace, at the spirit noodle stall, 3 steaming bowls of noodles were served, oil floating on the soup, topped with 2 slices of braised meat. Bai Yaoyao slurped the noodles, her face covered in soup. Uncle Fu Fu sipped in small mouthfuls. Su Jinlian held the bowl, her eating style extremely restrained, but the frequency of her chopsticks betrayed her. She finished half a bowl in 3 mouthfuls, and the braised meat in the bowl disappeared without a trace. She calmly pushed the bowl inward, covering it with her sleeve. Chen Chang'an shouted to the stall owner, "Another bowl," then took a sip of noodle soup, and got straight to the point. "How many years did you manage accounts at the Profound Heaven Holy Land?" 3 years. I was the deputy deacon of the Outer Sect Material Allocation Division. Su Jinlian put down her chopsticks, recovering that cold, aloof style. Later, I discovered evidence of the division elder embezzling spirit mine profits, doing fake accounts for 3 consecutive years. I hadn't reported it yet, when that elder backhanded me with a charge of embezzlement. Evidence destroyed. Witnesses defected. Physical evidence vanished. The tone was flat, as if talking about someone else's business, but the tips of her chopsticks tapped lightly on the edge of the bowl. Chen Chang'an nodded. To be able to see through the source and hidden dangers of a remnant technique at an auction at a glance. This kind of eyesight wasn't gained by wasting time in the marketplace. The second bowl of noodles was served. Su Jinlian hesitated for less than a second, picked it up, and continued eating. This time she didn't hide it anymore, eating cleanly and neatly. Chen Chang'an finished his bowl of noodle soup, put the bowl down, and leaned forward, his elbows resting on the greasy table. "Come to my Azure Cloud sect. Be the chief deacon of the accounting office." Su Jinlian's hand holding the bowl paused. Azure Cloud sect? Her expression turned from cold to stiff, her chopsticks hanging in midair. Her mind flashed through the roster of sects in the desolate province. No impression at all. Azure Cloud sect. The 3 characters didn't exist at all. She guessed it was a 9th-rate sect. Her lips moved, just about to speak, when Bai Yao Yao beside her, holding candied haws, poked her head onto the tabletop with a bang, interrupting with a mouth full of sugar syrup. "Our Azure Cloud sect is very powerful now. We have over 200 people." The little girl stretched out her syrup-stained fingers to gesture, getting more excited as she spoke. Senior brother even issued everyone lots and lots of spirit stones, a pile as big as a mountain. Su Jinlian looked at this 8-year-old girl at the peak of Foundation establishment, and then looked at this young man opposite her who was wearing a patched Taoist robe, but could pull out high-grade spirit stones casually. Her brows twisted. 200+ people. A mountain of spirit stones. 9th-rate sect. Putting these 3 pieces of information together, they seemed contradictory no matter how she looked at it. Chen Chang'an put down his bowl and chopsticks, leaning forward again, his elbows supporting him on the oily table. "To tell you the truth, the daily flow of spirit stones in the sect now is larger than you can imagine." Su Jinlian didn't answer, her face calm on the surface, but she had already started calculating with her abacus in her heart. A 9th-rate sect she had never heard of. The daily flow of spirit stones is unimaginably large. She had seen many scammers in the marketplace holding firefly stones pretending to be top-grade ones, but this person in front of her, the top-grade spirit stone just now was real, and the 8-year-old Peak Foundation establishment girl could not be fake. Chen Chang'an tapped his fingers on the table twice. "I need a clear-headed person, who can handle things, a professional talent, accounts, resource allocation, personnel salaries, grab it all." He paused for a beat. "I think you are the right person." Su Jinlian didn't answer immediately. She looked down at the half bowl of noodles left in the bowl. The soup had already cooled, the oil congealing on the surface, forming a circle of tiny white spots. From being kicked out of the Profound Heaven Holy Land to now, it had been 2 months. She had thought that one day someone would notice her ability, and give her a chance to prove herself again, but she didn't expect it to be a young man in a patched Taoist robe. "I'm sorry, sect leader Chen, I really can't believe it, because empty words have no proof." Su Jinlian put down her chopsticks, her chin slightly raised. "If you truly have this financial power, take me to your sect to see the real thing." She stood up, patting away the non-existent wrinkles on her gray skirt. "If you're deceiving me, I'll turn around and leave." Chen Chang'an laughed. He took out a low-grade spirit stone from the storage bag, slapping it onto the broken wooden table of the noodle stall. "Boss, check." The stall owner took the spirit stone and was stunned for a long time. A bowl of spirit wheat noodles costs 2 copper coins. This spirit stone was enough for his whole family to eat noodles until the next life. The owner chased after them 3 steps. "Guest, change. You need change." Chen Chang'an didn't look back, waving his hand. "No need." The 4 people walked out of the noodle stall. Su Jinlian walked half a step behind Chen Chang'an's side, her back straight. Her peripheral vision scanned the bulging storage bag at his waist from time to time. Her occupational disease was acting up. Judging by her 3 years of experience in material allocation, the extent of the bulging of that storage bag definitely contained more than just a few pieces of high-grade stones. Bai Yao Yao ran to Su Jinlian's side, looking up, lifting the half-stick of candied haws she had gnawed on, and holding it out to Su Jinlian. "Big sister, eat. It's sweet. There are even little tooth marks on it." Su Jinlian lowered her head and looked at this little girl whose hands were full of sugar stains. She reached out and took that half-stick of candied haws. Uncle Fu followed silently behind. The figures of the 4 people followed the dried-up riverbed, walking toward the main peak of the Azure Cloud sect. On the mountain top in the distance, a few wisps of smoke rose crookedly. That was Li Dainu, leading the new disciples to cook dinner. Su Jinlian's steps paused for a moment. She put the half-stick of candied haws Bai Yao Yao gave her into her mouth, and took took a bite. Sweet. The road up the mountain took half an hour. Su Jinlian's mouth didn't stop once. 1/3 of the stone steps on this mountain road are missing. You'd definitely fall to your death walking at night. Chen Chang'an. Where is the spirit gathering array? None. Then this spiritual energy concentration is even worse than the wilderness. Chen Chang'an. What's the matter with this tree? Growing crookedly and lying across the middle of the road. No one is cutting it down. Chen Chang'an. Uncle Fu followed behind, laughing secretly. He hadn't noticed this girl talked so much just now. Bai Yao Yao was happy skipping along beside Su Jinlian, nodding every time Su Jinlian complained. Big sister is right. This tree has been blocking the road for a long time. I bumped into it last time. When they arrived at the main hall of the main peak, Li Daniu was directing a group of people in the backyard moving bricks to repair houses, working vigorously. Seeing Chen Chang'an coming up with a new face, Li Daniu ran over, scrutinizing Su Jinlian from head to toe, lowering his voice and leaning into Chen Chang'an's ear. Sect leader, who is this? The newly recruited accounting deacon. Li Daniu opened his mouth, then looked at Su Jinlian's serious posture, wisely closing his mouth and retreating. Chen Chang'an took Su Jinlian into the sect leader's residence, a wooden house with wind leaking from all four sides, the tables and chairs missing legs, the oil paper pasted on the windows, broken into 2 large holes, the evening wind blowing in and whistling. Su Jinlian looked around, her expression tightening even more. The servant rooms for outer sect disciples in the profound heaven holy land were 10 times more decent than this. She began to doubt if she had been dizzied by the noodles. Chen Chang'an fished out the stack of crooked account papers written by Uncle Fu from his storage bag, slapping them directly in front of Su Jinlian. Since you are a professional, help me see what is wrong with these accounts. He leaned back, tucking his hands into his sleeves. After you read them, if you still feel it's not worth coming, I will never try to keep you. Su Jinlian instinctively reached out and took them. This was a professional habit carved into her bones. An accountant seeing an account book. Hands are faster than the brain. Opening the first page. High-grade spirit stone expenditure. 35 pieces. Purpose. Material procurement plus personnel resettlement. Her brows wrinkled. The cost of iron pots recorded under the pill category. The procurement of Taoist robes classified into the spirit rice category. Numbers insufficient. Drawn with zheng characters to make up. Every stroke crooked. Turning to the second page. The finger she used to flip the paper stopped. 6,630 low-grade spirit stones. Purpose. Advance of 3 months' salary for all members. 6,630. Turning to the third page. 960 low-grade spirit stones. Purpose. Advance of 3 months' salary for law enforcement hall disciples. High-grade spirit stone expenditure. 5 pieces. Purpose. Resettlement of law enforcement hall master. Source. Sect leader's private treasury. Su Jinlian raised her head abruptly. How much was the annual turnover of the small spirit mine she managed for 3 years at the profound heaven holy land? 20 high-grade ones. This 9th-rate sect, so broken that even the window paper couldn't be pasted tightly, had a cash expenditure within 2 days, more than the annual turnover of a spirit mine in the profound heaven holy land. Su Jinlian's fingers loosened, the grass paper sliding from her fingertips, drifting down onto the desktop. She bent down to pick it up, her fingers trembling violently, taking twice to grasp it. Are these accounts real? Chen Chang'an squatted down opposite her. Real or not, you are the professional. The numbers speak for themselves. You judge for yourself. Su Jinlian spread the grass paper out again, checking it line by line from beginning to end. The numbers could stand scrutiny. Every expenditure had a destination. Although the recording method was catastrophic, the amounts and number of people matched. 221 people. 10 low-grade spirit stones per person per month. 3-month advance. 6,630. There was no mathematical problem. Su Jinlian closed the grass paper, fingers pressing on it without letting go. The source is written as sect leader's private treasury. She raised her head, staring at Chen Chang'an. You, a young man at the qi refining stage, where did so many spirit stones come from in your private treasury? Chen Chang'an didn't answer directly. He held up a finger. These are just pocket money. Su Jinlian's Adam's apple rolled. If you come, what you manage is the daily major ledger. Chen Chang'an's finger swayed in front of her. Every day. Su Jinlian's pupils dilated slightly. Every day. The level of 6,630 low-grade spirit stones. Every day. She opened her mouth, closed it, closed, then opened, finally squeezing out a sentence. The voice was dry. Your bookkeeping method. Pots to pills. Robes to rice. 35 high-grade spent in 2 days. Su Jinlian slapped the stack of grass paper onto the table. If you continue recording like this, your sect will calculate its own accounts to death. Chen Chang'an raised his brows. That's why I need you. Su Jinlian took a deep breath. She picked up the bald brush from the table, speedily listing 3 lines of text on the blank space of the grass paper. Income and expenditure classification ledger. General ledger of personnel salaries. Detailed list of material procurement. These 3 books must be recorded separately. Daily settlement. Monthly reconciliation. The tip of the brush flew across the paper. The handwriting neat and clean. Compared to Uncle Fu's ghost symbols, it was simply a world of difference. You don't even have a decent abacus now, right? No. Accounting office? Neither. Just one table with missing legs. Su Jinlian set the bald brush onto the table. Monthly Monthly salary, 5 high-grade ones. I want a separate accounting office, fully equipped with abacus, account books, pen and ink. She stood up, the hem of her gray skirt swaying gently. Resettlement fee is? Chen Chang'an took out 5 high-grade spirit stones and pushed them over. Su Jinlian reached out and took them, putting them away. Su Jinlian, from today on, temporarily serving as the accounting deacon of the Azure Cloud sect. She paused. Ugly words first. I only manage the accounts. I don't cook fake books. No one's face works. Chen Chang'an pulled the corners of his mouth upward. That's exactly the sentence I wanted. In his mind, the system notification rang. Su Jinlian successfully recorded in the sect roster. Current sect-bound population, 254 people. One more head. Chen Chang'an pushed that stack of messy grass paper toward Su Jinlian. Then start from now. Resort out the messy accounts of the past 2 days. Tomorrow morning, I want to see a crystal clear general ledger. Su Jinlian had already sat down, the bald brush back in her hand, opening the first page of the grass paper and starting to verify line by line, muttering to herself. Pot recorded in the pill category. Who taught this bookkeeping method? This Zheng character has 6 strokes. Is 6 strokes 5 or 6? The night faded away, the sky just beginning to brighten. Chen Chang'an, lying on the bed mat, was woken up on time by the extremely crisp notification sound in his mind. Daily settlement complete. Current sect-bound population, 254 people. Today's reward has been issued. 254 top-grade spirit stones, already deposited into the system space, can be withdrawn at any time. Chen Chang'an opened his eyes, the corners of his mouth rising uncontrollably. 254 top-grade spirit stones, converted to 254 million low-grade ones. This is his Azure Cloud sect's current daily basic income. Get up, put on the Taoist robe. A rush of rhythmic clatter came from outside the door. Chen Chang'an pushed open the wooden door, walking to the door of the accounting office temporarily vacated next door. Inside the room, the dim yellow candlelight flickered. Su Jinlian had worked all night, huddled before the table, her left hand rapidly manipulating the abacus, her right hand holding the brush to record. 3 brand new account books were spread out all over the table. The bald brush had already been replaced, and 2 waste brush heads that had been written bald were thrown aside. Sorted out. Su Jinlian pushed the 3 account books in front of Chen Chang'an, a circle of blue-black under her eyes, but the tone of her speech couldn't pick out any signs of fatigue. Income and expenditure classification ledger, general ledger of personnel salaries, detailed list of material procurement. All 3 years of debts have been pushed back and rebuilt. Chen Chang'an opened the income and expenditure classification ledger, the numbers crystal clear, the items distinct, the handwriting upright and pleasing to the eye. Comparing Uncle Fu's stack of ghost symbols drawn with Zheng characters to this, is simply the record-keeping style of a caveman. But there is a big problem. Su Jinlian pushed the abacus forward, and after returning the beads to 0, recalculated a set of numbers. The Azure Cloud sect currently only has 3 mountain peaks registered with the Immortal Alliance. 1 main peak, 2 side peaks. One of the side peaks was just merged from the Mad Blade sect. 254 people squeezed onto these 3 mountain peaks. The main peak backyard is already full, and the old houses on the side peaks haven't been repaired yet. The accommodation gap is very large. She closed the abacus. Need to expand territory. Chen Chang'an nodded. He had been pondering this yesterday. What is the land deed approval process for the Immortal Alliance? Su Jinlian frowned. Normal process. Submit application, qualification audit, on-site inspection, then countersigning at the branch. Walking through the set takes at least half a year, and need to pay a large amount of audit fees in the middle. Half a year is too long. There is another way. The special handling channel. Su Jinlian held up a finger. Requires personal approval from the Immortal Alliance branch director. But this path is basically reserved for top 3 sect grades. Chen Chang'an stood up, patting his storage bag. Then go find him. Su Jinlian stopped him. You, a chi refining sect leader of a 9th-rate sect, can't even get through the door of the Immortal Alliance branch. Chen Chang'an looked back at her. People say, money makes the devil push the mill. I don't believe that. He weighed the storage bag in his hand. I think money makes the mill push the devil. Su Jinlian opened her mouth, but didn't catch the words. It takes several medium-sized teleportation arrays to travel from the Azure Cloud sect to the Immortal Alliance branch, crossing many regions in between. The fare is very expensive, but Chen Chang'an is not short of money, only taking the nearest and fastest route. In less than an hour, the 3 saw a magnificent building complex occupying half a mountain peak, 10 times more impressive than the entire Azure Cloud sect put together. The ground was paved with spiritual jade bricks, spiritual energy seeping up from the gaps in the bricks as one stepped on them, each step comfortable. The pillars were carved with complex rune formations, spiritual light circulating faintly. 2 stone-carved spiritual beasts crouched on the left and right at the entrance of the main hall, each bristle carved to reveal every detail. Bai Yao Yao turned her head left and right. Everything looked fresh. Senior brother, the bricks on the ground are so shiny. Better looking than the ones at our place. Should we pave this kind of brick when we go back? Good. Pave. Pave with large blocks. Su Jinlian walked half a step behind Chen Chang'an's left side, her back standing straighter than the pillars. She had spent 3 years in the profound Heaven Holy Land, and was very familiar with the rules and paths of the Immortal Alliance. The 3 walked into the main main hall. The clerk responsible for auditing land deeds sat behind the counter, a thin middle-aged man, sporting a goatee, crossing his legs and eating melon seeds, with sunflower seed shell fragments stuck in his fingernails, eating a seed, flipping a page of an idle book, living more comfortably than anyone else. Chen Chang'an handed over the sect token. The clerk took the token and scanned it, his action of eating seeds not stopping. Clack, spitting a shell onto the ground. Azure Cloud Sect, the clerk sneered, tossing the token back onto the counter casually. He dug out a thick black-skinned booklet, flipping pages with spit on his finger. Not paid quota for 3 consecutive years, absent from last assessment, complaint record. He counted, whistling. Good heavens, a huge stack. The black-skinned booklet was tossed onto the table by him. To tell the truth, Azure Cloud Sect's legal qualification. I submitted an application for cancellation last month. The clerk put his feet down from the table, finally looking at Chen Chang'an directly. In 7 days, even your main peak land deed will be taken back. In other words, he flicked a shell into the trash can, flicking it away. Too lazy to pick it up. Your Azure Cloud Sect no longer exists. Su Jinlian's fist, gripped tightly in her sleeve, teeth biting, no sound made. 3 years in the profound heaven holy land. She knew the faces of these small clerks in the Immortal Alliance too well. The lower the sect grade, the less they are treated as human in front of them. Bai Yao Yao sensed the atmosphere was wrong, her buns tilting, her little face showing an unhappy expression. She tugged at Chen Chang'an's sleeve, mumbling softly, "Senior brother, this uncle looks so ugly." Chen Chang'an patted her bun, taking 2 steps forward, walking to the counter, reaching his hand into the storage bag. The first high-grade spirit stone landed on the audit desk. Ding! The clerk's hand eating seeds paused. The second, the third, ding, ding, the fifth, the 10th. Seed shells fell from the clerk's mouth. He didn't even notice. The 20th, the 30th. 30 high-grade spirit stones piled neatly on the audit desk, the spiritual energy overflowing, whirling the seed shells on the table all over the room. The clerk inhaled a piece of seed shell fragment into his nose, coughing violently twice. But his eyes were nailed to that pile of spirit stones, unable to pull them out. 3 years of protection fees, 100 medium-grade spirit stones per year. 3 years equivalent to 30 high-grade ones. Chen Chang'an straightened the last spirit stone, counting them one by one. The clerk's Adam's apple rolled several times. The half-seed he was eating slipped from his fingertips, dropping onto the table and bouncing twice, rolling into a gap in the pile of spirit stones. 30 high-grade spirit stones. He had been in this position for 8 years, handling no less than 100 ninth-grade sects, let alone 30 high-grade ones. The number of ninth-rate sects that could pay the protection fee on time could be counted on one hand. What is this situation? The clerk sat up straight again, clearing his throat. The contempt on his face disappeared, replaced by a kind of scrutinizing vigilance. Quota fee paid. The cancellation application can be suspended. He flipped the black-skinned booklet to a new page, drawing a tick next to the characters, Azure Cloud Sect. But if you want to expand territory, the clerk shook his head with curled corners. According to Immortal Alliance regulations, a 9th-grade sect is only allowed to hold under 3 mountain peaks. Want to upgrade? Pass the annual assessment first. The next assessment is in half a year. He tossed the pen onto the table, his tone full of official coldness. Rules are rules. You have money, that's your business. Chen Chang'an didn't answer. His gaze moved away from the clerk's face, casually scanning the 4 walls of the main hall, covered with all kinds of notices and announcements, stacked layer upon layer. Most were trivial reports. A sect owing fees, a rogue cultivator violating rules, a spirit mine ownership change. One of them was posted in the most conspicuous position, in vermilion characters, 3 sizes larger than the notices next to it. Emergency notice. South Desolate Beast Tide triggering large-scale refugee migration to the north. Desolate Province Immortal Alliance branches need to properly resettle refugee cultivators and mortal civilians pouring into the jurisdiction. Completion deadline within 3 months. Failure will lead to direct accountability from the upper sect. The edges of the notice were curled, yellowed, clearly posted for some days. Chen Chang'an read the content on the notice clearly. I heard. He turned back, his tone like chatting. The Immortal Alliance is currently exhausted from resettling the 10,000 refugees who fled the South Desolate Beast Tide. The expression on the clerk's face instantly froze, the arc of looking down still hanging on the corner of his mouth. But his entire face seemed to have been pressed on pause. This matter could almost be considered the most troublesome mess for the Immortal Alliance branch at all levels. 10,000 refugees, mostly mortals and rogue cultivators with trashed spirit roots, cannot cultivate, cannot produce. Resettling them requires grain, requires housing, requires medicine, all pure consumption, with not half a benefit. The upper sect gave a hard deadline of 3 months. If it cannot be solved within the time limit, the branch director will be directly replaced. In these 2 months, the branch has visited every recognizable sect in the jurisdiction one by one, and not a single one was willing to take them. First-grade Holy Lands disdained the trouble. Second-grade sects disdained the loss. The remaining sects simply didn't have the capability. The clerk was poked in the sore spot, his face changing several times, but he didn't dare to express an attitude arbitrarily, giving a dry laugh. This matter is inquired about personally by the branch director, not under the subordinate's jurisdiction. Chen Chang'an interrupted him. These refugees, my Azure Cloud sect takes them them all. The words in the clerk's mouth got stuck in his throat. Food provided. Housing provided. No need for the Immortal Alliance to pay a single spirit stone. Clatter. The teacup by the clerk's hand slid off the corner of the table, smashing into pieces. Hot tea splashed his legs, but he didn't even notice. What did you say? His voice cracked, sharp, unlike his own. A ninth-rate sect, can't even feed itself, and you're taking 10,000 refugees? Are you crazy? Su Jinlian behind Chen Chang'an raised her head abruptly. 10,000 people. Her brain was already rapidly calculating on the abacus. 10,000 people's eating, wearing, living, traveling, calculated by minimum standards. Monthly expenditure requires at least 30,000 low-grade spirit stones. 3 months is 90,000, not including construction materials, medicinal materials, contingency funds for emergencies. This account. She opened her mouth, wanting to say something, but in the end, no sound came out. Bai Yao Yao was counting on her fingers nearby, counting for a long time, then gave up. Senior brother, how many ones are in 10,000? 10,000 of them. Oh, Bai Yao Yao nodded. Then are there enough candied haws to go around? The clerk already couldn't care about the melon seeds. He sprang from his chair, almost overturning the table. You wait here and don't leave. Turning around, he rushed toward the back hall. The main hall was quiet for 3 seconds, then a violent fluctuation of spiritual power came from deep within the back hall. Heavy footsteps arrived hurriedly, bringing oppressive spiritual energy and a fierce wind, tearing open the curtain hanging down from the back hall. An elderly man with white hair, dressed in a purple-gold robe of the Immortal Alliance, strode out. His full head of white hair was tied meticulously, his face was thin and refined, and his brows were etched with deep fatigue. The elder in charge of the desolate province branch of the Immortal Alliance, Fang Qingyuan. The manager was so scared he darted out from behind his chair, bowing his waist and retreating into a corner. Fang Qingyuan didn't even look at him. The old man took 2 steps to stand in front of Chen Chang'an, his eyes staring fixedly at him. A hoarse voice squeezed out of his throat, carrying a tremor that was almost a plea. Is what you just said true? He grabbed Chen Chang'an's wrist, but held back his strength. Chen Chang'an didn't pull his hand away. He looked down at the back of Fang Qingyuan's hand with veins popping out, then looked up again, meeting the old man's bloodshot eyes. This highest-ranking official of the desolate province Immortal Alliance, the force with which he gripped his wrist right now, was like a drowning man grabbing the last floating plank. Chen Chang'an wiggled his tightly gripped fingers, revealing a harmless smile, truer than pearls. However, we need to discuss conditions. Fang Qingyuan respectfully invited Chen Chang'an into the back hall. Just as the manager was about to lift his feet to follow, Fang Qingyuan turned his head and shot a look at him. The manager's foot hung in midair, froze for a moment, and then honestly retreated back behind the counter. In the back hall's secret chamber, the 4 walls were covered with maps of the desolate province jurisdiction, dotted with dense little flags, red, yellow, black. A pile of official documents as high as half a person sat in the corner, covered in a thick layer of dust. Fang Qingyuan closed the door, sealed the sound-dampening array with spiritual energy, and turned around. His expression when looking at Chen Chang'an was completely different from before. No elder's airs, no condescending posture, and he even lowered his voice. Sect leader Chen, let's speak frankly. Fang Qingyuan pulled a document from his robes, and spread it out on the table. The vermilion seal was clear, the handwriting sharp, with the dedicated seal of the Heavenly Pivot Academy of the upper sect stamped at the end. Chen Chang'an glanced at it. The wording was extremely cold. Order the desolate province branch to properly resettle the refugees within 1 month. If overdue and unsuccessful, the elder in charge will be dismissed from office and investigated, and the branch will be demoted. Fang Qingyuan put the document away, pinching creases along the edges of the envelope. The South Desolate Beast Tide erupted 3 months ago. Mortals and bottom-level rogue cultivators fled north, with over 10,000 refugees pouring into the desolate province. The Immortal Alliance allocates resettlement quotas by jurisdiction, and my branch was assigned exactly 10,000. For 2 months, I have visited every notable sect in the desolate province one by one. Fang Qingyuan gave a bitter smile, which looked even worse than crying. The managers of the 4 major holy lands wouldn't even let me in the door. The documents were returned directly. Second-rate sects made excuses, saying their territory was tight, and grain was scarce. As for the remaining small sects, he shook his head. They can't handle it. Chen Chang'an didn't rush to respond. He pulled up a chair and sat down, smoothly crossing his legs. 10 seconds of silence. Elder Fang, I'll ask one thing first. Among these 10,000 refugees, how many are cultivators? How many are mortals? Fang Qingyuan was stunned for a moment, then replied, fewer than 4,000 are cultivators, all bottom-level rogue cultivators at the qi refining stage. The remaining 6,000 plus are mortals. Chen Chang'an's fingers tapped the table in a steady rhythm, his expression unchanged, but his heart thumped heavily in his chest. 10,000. 10,000 living people, recording them into the sect roster. Every day, 10,000 top-grade spirit stones credited, converted to low-grade spirit stones. mouths. 10 billion. Every day. Chen Chang'an almost couldn't hold it together, biting his upper lip with his lower lip, firmly suppressing the laughter that was about to burst out of his throat. Then he frowned, twisting his face, squeezing out an extremely troubled, miserable look. Elder Fang. 10,000 people. This is not a small number. When Fang Qingyuan saw this expression, his heart sank. It's going to fail. The old man immediately increased his offer. Sect leader Chen, let me finish. Fang Qingyuan pulled a map off the wall and spread it on the table, circling a large area in the southwest corner of the desolate province with his finger. Not far from your sect, there are exactly 10 barren mountains that have been idle for many years. They used to be abandoned spirit mine pits. The spiritual veins are exhausted. No one wants them. I will, free of charge, transfer these 10 mountain peaks to the Azure Cloud sect. He slapped the table heavily. Free, not charging a single cent. After speaking, he started rummaging for the land deed documents, his movement so urgent that he swept a stack of files off the table. Fang Qingyuan dug out the 10 land deeds, hastily spreading them out on the desktop, one by one, pushing them toward Chen Chang'an. Look, although the spiritual veins of these 10 mountains are dead, they are large enough. Putting these mountain peaks together, it is more than enough to house 10,000 people. Chen Chang'an reached out and pressed down on the stack of land deeds, flipping through and looking at them, then pushed the deeds back. Elder Fang. Just this? Fang Qingyuan's mouth hung open, unable to close. 10,000 mouths. 10 barren mountains without spiritual veins. Chen Chang'an leaned back in his chair. Do you want me to resettle the people? Or do you want me to starve them to death so I can be the scapegoat for the Immortal Alliance? The secret chamber was silent for 3 breaths. A dry gulp came from Fang Qingyuan's throat, the muscles on his face twitching twice. In 30 years of cultivation, he had experienced beast sieges on cities, purges by the upper sect, and infighting among sect members, but he had never experienced this before. A 9th-rate sect leader at the qi refining stage, sitting opposite him and being picky, yet he couldn't get angry. What does sect leader Chen mean? Chen Chang'an held up his first finger. First, the 10 barren mountains must come with official development permits from the Immortal Alliance, allowing me to repair the spiritual veins myself, open a marketplace, and build towns. Fang Qingyuan rolled his Adam's apple, remaining silent. The second finger went up. Second, upgrade the Azure Cloud sect's grade, from 9th rate to 7th rate. Fang Qingyuan's brows twisted into a knot. Directly jumping 2 levels from 9th to 7th, had almost no precedent in the history of the Immortal Alliance. The third finger went up. Third, the Immortal Alliance issues a sealed document, announcing to all sects in the desolate province, that the Azure Cloud sect is an official refugee resettlement point authorized by the Immortal Alliance. Chen Chang'an waved the 3 fingers in front of Fang Qingyuan. In the future, whoever comes to find trouble with me, is going against the Immortal Alliance. Elder Fang. 3 conditions. Please consider them. Fang Qingyuan stood there supporting himself on the edge of the table, not saying a word. His fingers rubbed repeatedly over the land deeds, the friction against the parchment making a faint rustling sound. 10 breaths. 20 breaths. Fang Qingyuan was engaged in an intense inner struggle. After 30 breaths, Fang Qingyuan spoke. Development permit and official authorization. No problem. These are originally authorities my branch can approve. He paused. But upgrading to 7th grade, according to Immortal Alliance rules, must have at least one nascent soul stage cultivator serving as the protecting sect elder. Without this person, the upper sect won't approve the document. He paused. Today is the first day. Chen Chang'an flipped through the documents, and put them down. How many nascent soul rogue cultivators are there in the desolate province? None. Su Jinlian's answer was crisp and direct. There are 537 nascent soul cultivators registered with the Immortal Alliance in the desolate province, all belonging to major sects and families. She closed the abacus. These people are either being honored, or being tied down. None of them can be poached. Li Daniu squatted in the corner, his voice still hoarse, squeezing out a sentence in a breathy voice. Then let's go outside to find them. Other provinces? Too late. Zhou Taizhan hugged his blade, leaning against a pillar. 3 days' time. Just traveling would take 2 days. Nobody in the main hall spoke for quite a while. Bai Yao Yao turned over on the threshold, waking up halfway in a daze, rubbing her eyes and peering inside. Senior brother, what are you arguing about? Looking for people. Chen Chang'an squatted down, helping her retie the bun that had gone crooked. What kind of people? Looking for a very powerful old grandpa. Nascent soul stage. Bai Yao Yao tilted her head and thought for a moment, swallowing the leftover candied whole residue in her mouth. Then wouldn't it be better to find one who hasn't been snatched away by others? Chen Chang'an's hand tying the bun paused. Su Jinlian's hand manipulating the abacus also stopped. The two looked at the little girl on the threshold simultaneously. Bai Yao Yao felt a bit hairy being stared at, shrinking her neck. Did I say something wrong? No. Chen Chang'an patted her head, stood up and looked at Su Jinlian. Are there any nascent soul cultivators not registered? Su Jinlian didn't answer immediately. Her fingers manipulated the abacus beads back and forth twice, not calculating numbers, but thinking about things. After a dozen breaths, she spoke. There is one person. Several people in the main hall pricked up their ears in unison. Zhou Kumu. When Su Jinlian spat out these 3 characters, her voice was half a level lower than usual. Former outer sect elder of the profound heaven holy land. Sword cultivator. Cultivation at his peak was half-step god transformation. Zhou Taizhan Chan stood up straight abruptly. Half-step God transformation. Peak nascent soul. 20 years ago, he uncovered a rotten account of private embezzlement of a spirit mine within the Holy Land. The amount of spirit stones involved was extremely astronomical. He organized the evidence, and prepared to report it to the Holy Land's discussion hall. Su Jinlian paused. As a result, before he could report it, the elder in charge of the case struck first, slandering him as colluding with enemies and betraying the sect, forging evidence, and mobilized the law enforcement hall to seize him overnight. And then, Li Daniu asked with a hoarse voice. The law enforcement hall abolished his sword heart, deprived him of his cultivation, and expelled him from the sect. Su Jinlian's speed of speech was very flat. This case was suppressed tightly within the Holy Land back then. I was organizing old archives in the Material Allocation Division 3 years ago, when I accidentally flipped through a sealed file. She raised her head. There was a record in the file. Zhou Kumu's nascent soul was not shattered. The law enforcement hall used a sealing technique to seal his nascent soul tightly in his dantian. Chen Chang'an's frequency of tapping the table changed. Sealed, not shattered. Correct. Sealed. Su Jinlian nodded. Sealed and shattered are two different things. Shattered means shattered. Even gods can't put it back. But sealed, theoretically, as long as the method to unseal is found, the nascent soul can still operate again. Chen Chang'an didn't tap the table anymore. Where is he now? Su Jinlian hesitated for a moment. Right in the waste recycling alley at the easternmost part of the Eastern Rogue Cultivator marketplace. Su Jinlian paused, adding an explanation. Coincidentally, because the profound Heaven Holy Land is located in the most prosperous spirit vein area in the east of our desolate province, the so-called Great Hiding in the city, hiding under the lamp is the safest. Whether it's Elder Zhou who was abolished and expelled, or me who was forced to leave the Holy Land, in the end, all drifted, and lay dormant in this same Rogue Cultivator marketplace in the east. She added a sentence, her voice even lower. I saw him from afar once last time, repairing pots and sharpening knives for rogue cultivators, earning 10 copper coins a day. Nobody in the main hall spoke. Zhou Tieshan's hand gripping the blade tightened. A half-step god transformation sword cultivator, reduced to repairing pots for rogue cultivators. If this word spread outside, all the cultivators in the desolate province would think it was a made-up lie. Chen Chang'an stood up from the chair. Let's go. Taizhan, Yao Yao, follow me. Bai Yao Yao bounced up from the threshold, hugging his arm. Going down the mountain again. By Candied Hawes. By several more. The waste recycling alley at the east end of the marketplace was separated from the main road of the marketplace by a full 6 alleys. For every additional alley walked, the road underfoot became 1 point more rotten. By the last one, there was no road anymore. Underfoot was all broken magical tool fragments and discarded spirit stone dregs, crunching as one stepped on them. The low walls on both sides were covered in rust. The alley so narrow that 2 people walking side by side had to turn sideways. The smell in the air had also changed. Iron rust smell, moldy smell, and the sour stench drifting over from the stinking ditch at the end of the alley. Bai Yao Yao held her nose, her other hand gripping Chen Chang'an's sleeve tightly. Senior brother, so smelly, bear with it. Zhou Taizhan followed slowly behind, his eyes staring fixedly at a certain direction at the end of the alley, not making a sound. Walking to the end of the alley, by the stinking ditch, a person was squatting. The hunched back was arched into an arc, gray-white hair hanging messily on both shoulders, greasy and knotted, covered in rust dust. A broken hemp garment with indistinguishable color was wrapped on his body, the cuffs worn down to only a few thread ends. On the ground in front of him was a row of broken copper and iron, a notched kitchen knife, a dented iron pot, a broken iron shovel. The old man held a broken sword in his hand, only half of the blade remaining, the break uneven, full of rust spots and notches. The winding rope on the hilt had long since rotted away, revealing the dark iron bone underneath. He was using this broken sword to scrape the bottom of an iron pot. Brush, brush, stove ash and iron rust were scraped away layer by layer, falling into the rotten mud by the stinking ditch. Zhou Tieshan's feet were nailed to the spot, unable to move. Chen Chang'an turned back to look at him. Zhou Tieshan's Adam's apple rolled several times, squeezing a few words out of his throat. That sword is not an ordinary item. Chen Chang'an didn't speak, walking a few steps forward, and squatted down. Senior Zhou. The sound of scraping the pot paused for half a beat, then continued again. I am the Azure Cloud sect leader. Chen Chang'an. No response. I have come to invite you to come out of the mountain, to serve as the protecting sect elder of the Azure Cloud sect. The old man's hand finally stopped. He didn't look up, his muddy eyeball staring at the broken pot he was halfway through scraping. His lips cracked, embedded with a layer of dust. Monthly salary, 50 high-grade spirit stones, independent courtyard, unlimited supply of resources. Chen Chang'an reported the conditions, his tone not much different from buying candied haws in the marketplace. 50 high-grade. 2 rogue cultivators peeking at the alley entrance heard this number, their bodies swaying violently, legs going soft and almost kneeling. Zhou Kumu's hand holding the broken sword did not move. He remained silent for a long time, so long that Bai Yao Yao thought this grandpa had fallen asleep. She reached out, wanting to poke his arm, but was pressed down by Chen Chang'an. My sword heart was abolished 20 years ago. The voice ground out from the old man's throat, dry and rough, like two pieces of sandpaper rubbing against each other. 7 or 8/10 of my meridians are withered. These hands of mine now can barely scrape a complete pot. He pushed the scraped iron pot aside, and picked up the next one. Let alone the nascent soul stage. The me of today can't even beat a hairy boy at the chi refining stage. The broken sword rested on the bottom of the pot again. Brush. No matter how many spirit stones you spend, you can't buy back a second life for a cripple. Brush. Go away. Don't waste your money. Chen Chang'an squatted where he was, not rising. He looked at the broken sword in the old man's hand. There was an extremely thin rune imprint on the hilt, half covered by rust and stains, but beneath the rust color, one could vaguely identify the remnants of the character Xian. He didn't continue to persuade him. His hand reaching into the storage bag, taking out a top-grade spirit stone, he bent over, placing it gently into the coarse pottery bowl in front of Zhou Kumu used for collecting wages. The bowl was very broken, with a winding crack at the bottom, extending from the bottom all the way to the rim. The instant the top-grade spirit stone fell to the bottom of the bowl, a brilliant white spiritual light seeped out from the crack in the bowl's bottom, like water pouring into a parched riverbed. The crack was filled with spiritual energy, shattered light spreading along the fissure, crawling all the way to the rim. Spiritual energy overflowed, and the air within a 5-yard radius changed quality instantly. The dust floating in mid-air dropped to the ground in unison. The green stagnant water in the stinking ditch was pressed motionless by the spiritual pressure. The maggots crawling on the water surface froze in place, and even the flies resting on the scrap iron heap couldn't take flight. The two rogue cultivators peeking at the alley entrance slumped onto the ground, their whole bodies shaking like chaff. Zhou Kumu's hand scraping the pot. Truly stopped this time. Completely stopped. He didn't look at the spirit stone. He was looking at his own hand. That right hand, so thin that the skin covered the bones, was shaking. It wasn't the tremor of an elderly person, but a vibration coming from the seams of his bones, from the depths of his meridians, from the very core of his dantian, his nascent soul. That nascent soul, locked away by a sealing technique for 20 years, emitted an extremely faint pulse under the scouring of the top-grade spirit stone's spiritual energy, like a heartbeat transmitted through a 3-foot-thick layer of ice. It was almost inaudible, but Zhou Kumu heard it. He froze right there, the 5 fingers holding the broken sword slowly tightening, knuckles turning white. Veins floated up one by one on the back of his withered hand. Chen Chang'an stood up, patting the dust off his knees. Old senior, your sword heart was indeed abolished. He took a step back. But your nascent soul is still there. Zhou Kumu didn't look up, nor did he answer. The broken sword rested on his knees, his fingers rubbing the Xian character imprint covered by rust on the hilt. One by one, Chen Chang'an turned around, and walked toward the alley. After 3 steps, he stopped. I will come again at this time tomorrow, bringing something for you to see. His voice came from ahead, neither high nor low. Whether it can make you pick up the sword again, judge for yourself. He didn't look back again. Bai Yao Yao ran to Zhou Kumu, stuffing the last stick of candied haws she had been holding all the way into the old man's arms. Grandpa, eat. It's very sweet. After eating, you won't be thin anymore. The little girl clapped her hands covered in sugar stains, bouncing and chasing Chen Chang'an's silhouette. Zhou Taizhan looked deeply at Zhou Kumu, bowed and saluted, then turned and followed. The sound of the 3 people's footsteps gradually faded. The alley became quiet again. The stagnant water in the stinking ditch resumed its flow. The flies took flight again. The dust floated back up. Zhou Kumu sat alone at the end of the alley, holding a stick of candied haws in his arms. In the broken bowl in front of him, the top-grade spirit stone emitted a brilliant white light, blindingly bright in the depths of the dark alley. He sat for a long time, so long that the 2 rogue cultivators at the alley entrance had left, so long that the maggots by the stinking ditch had crawled past his feet. He reached out, his fingertips touching the surface of the top-grade spirit stone. Spiritual energy entered his body, deep in the corner of his meridians that had been withered for 20 years. In an extremely secret place, a faint sound came. It wasn't shattering. It was the first crack opening on a surface of ice. Zhou Kumu's hand shrank back. He looked down at the spirit stone, a thin layer of watery light welling up in the depths of his muddy eyes. Then he gripped the spirit stone in his palm, gripping it very, very tightly. He also picked up the stick of candied haws in his arms, and took a bite. Sweet. The sun shifted west. The 3 of them returned to the main peak of the Azure Cloud sect. When Chen Chang'an returned to the main hall, Su Jinlian was dozing off on the accounting table, with an account book written halfway spread beside her hand, a few abacus beads scattered on the desktop. He didn't wake her. Taizhan, is there a black market in the desolate province? Are you familiar with it? Zhou Taizhan was stunned for a beat. Black market? Not the ordinary street night markets. Chen Chang'an gestured. The kind that are a bit higher level. The kind where you can bid on good things. Zhou Taizhan pondered for a few seconds. Yes, underground at the Withered Bone Spirit Mine in the northeast of the desolate province, there is a secret auction house, specializing in auctioning weapons, called the Rusty Iron Pavilion. It is a gray zone not under the jurisdiction of the Immortal Alliance. Zhou Taizhan explained. It holds auctions every 3rd and 13th day of the month, only accepting high-grade spirit stones for entry. The things inside are mixed with dragons and snakes, specializing in handling black goods flowing out of large sections. Occasionally, Occasionally, some rare hard goods can also emerge. He paused. Today is a 3-day. There is one tonight. Chen Chang'an patted his shoulder. Then we'll go for a trip tonight. Zhou Taizhan nodded, not asking more. Night fell. Chen Chang'an brought Zhou Taizhan and Su Jinlian, passing through several teleportation arrays, and arrived beside the entrance of the rusty iron pavilion in the northeast of the desolate province. This place was indeed remote. Following Zhou Taizhan, they turned 7 or 8 corners back and forth, finally stopping in front of a crooked coffin shop. The 2 wooden doors were nailed full of copper nails, with a yellowing white banner hanging from the lintel, flapping in the night wind. Here, Zhou Taizhan nodded, stepping forward and knocking on the door 3 times. The door opened a crack, revealing half a face. Zhou Taizhan showed a black iron plaque in his hand. The half-face shrank back, and the door opened silently. Inside, it wasn't a coffin shop. Passing through a narrow and long passage, the wooden floor underfoot turned into stone steps. The deeper they walked, the more firefly stones were embedded in the stone walls for guidance. The light was dim yellow. The air permeated with the iron rusty smell peculiar to minerals. After walking for about the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, the sight before them suddenly widened. The mine tunnel had been completely hollowed out, the dome impossibly high, embedded with dense, countless night-luminescent pearls, emitting a cold white light. The ground was paved with spirit-gathering jade bricks, spiritual energy surging up from the soles of the feet as one stepped on them. Coarse stones were chiseled out around to create seats of varying heights, divided into 3 levels. The bottom level of ordinary seats was crowded with over 100 people. The second-level circular corridor was grade A private rooms. The highest part was completely covered with heavy curtains, making it impossible to see who was sitting inside. Someone at the entrance handed over 3 bronze masks. Chen Chang'an took them, handing one to Su Jinlian, and one to Zhou Taizhan. The rules were, enter with masks, bid with number plates, ask no questions about the origin, verify no identities. Su Jinlian put on the mask, lowering her voice. Auction settlements are paid on the spot with spirit stones. No credit, no debt. The 3 were led to sit in the last row of the ordinary seats. Su Jinlian's gaze swept across the second-level circular corridor, and suddenly her body leaned toward Chen Chang'an's direction. The 3rd private room on the left, second level. Chen Chang'an glanced in her direction. Hanging on the railing of the private room was a flag, dark blue base, silver patterns, embroidered with a single vertical long sword, the mark of a profound heaven holy land outer sect deacon. Su Jinlian's voice became even lower. Chen Chang'an gave a hum, picking up the number plate on the stone table in front of him and flipping it. How many people? Can't see clearly. The curtains are blocking it, but at least brought 3 or 4 attendants. Zhou Taizhan sat on the other side holding his blade, the sound muffled from under the bronze mask. In this kind of underground auction house, being too flashy easily invites trouble. I know. Chen Chang'an put down the number plate. The auction began. A tall and thin middle-aged man walked onto the exhibition stand, wearing a black robe, wearing the same bronze mask as everyone else.